Hello and welcome to Chinese Novel Audiobook. Explore our playlist for more captivating novels, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 81, The Descent. Under Eden's imposing presence, Yusuf instinctively took a step back. Yusuf drew on more power, his numerous eyes began to bulge with blood vessels, and more fleshy tendrils sprouted from his body. The tendrils, as agile as octopus tentacles, whipped towards Eden, coiling tightly around him. One of the largest tendrils grew an extremely sharp, coldly gleaming stinger. Like a venomous snake, the stinger raised high before striking fiercely at Eden's head. This was the result of Yusuf's merging of multiple biological traits, using the power of the great many-eyed god to craft his formidable body. The stinger, made of a refined adamantium alloy, contained a sac of lethal poison, perfect for a surprise attack. If Eden allowed that stinger to hit him, even if he didn't die, he would be gravely injured, Yusuf thought smugly. Soon, Eden would be writhing in agony before him, regretting his decision to oppose him, and then perish in despair. But his hope was crushed. The stinger halted mere centimeters from Eden's eye, unable to move further. What? Yusuf roared in fury, realizing that his stinger was being restrained by a force. It was psychic power. How could this worthless man be such a powerful psyker? Before Yusuf could react, a numbing sensation spread through his arms. Golden electric currents flowed around Eden's body, growing stronger, burning the tendrils wrapped around him. The tendrils' cellular structure was quickly destroyed by the psychic energy, turning charred and brittle. Cooked, with a faint scent of burning flesh in the air. With a simple flex, Eden broke free, the tendrils snapping and falling to the ground. Damn it! Yusuf tried to flee, but it was too late. A sharp pain pierced his abdomen. Looking down, he saw a familiar stinger embedded in his stomach. My dear, you didn't happen to develop an antidote, did you? Eden stood in front of Yusuf, casually asking. Get away. Yusuf panicked and threw a powerful punch at Eden. But Eden didn't move, simply tilting his head slightly to dodge. Scared? Do you feel like a clown now? Eden's face was cold as he clenched his fist and slammed it into Yusuf's face. This one's for being a damn idiot. Yusuf's face twisted and deformed from the punch, spitting out half of his teeth as he stumbled back in disgrace. You dare. Bang. Another hit crushed Yusuf's nose, blood pouring out. This one's for all the innocent lives you've ruined. Yusuf suffered a relentless barrage of punches. For the revenge of the Hoffman family. For the God Emperor. For world peace. There are far too many tyrants in the world who act with impunity, disregarding lives. To achieve their goals, they use the lower-class people as pawns, inflicting suffering on the innocent. And rarely is there anyone who can bring them to justice. These kinds of men are often lured by the dark gods, turning into maniacs who would stop at nothing. In the end, they bring massive destruction, sometimes even the fall of entire planetary civilizations. For scum like this, they need to be taught the meaning of pain. Eden unleashed all the fury he had built up over these days on Yusuf. The psychic-powered punches not only broke his bones but also hindered his regeneration, amplifying his agony. Yusuf kept stumbling backward, his upper body reduced to fragments of shattered bones, howling in pain. Go to hell. Eden gathered his strength and delivered a crushing blow to Yusuf's abdomen, sending him flying into the giant glass incubation tank before crashing to the ground. Yusuf's twisted body lay there, vomiting black blood. He struggled to get up, but his shattered bones left him limp, unable to find any strength to stand. With Yusuf down, Eden quickly turned his focus to the giant glass incubation tank. He could feel the chaos embryo growing more and more active. The dark eyes on the embryo began twitching rapidly, and eerie whispers echoed from around it. That cursed thing was about to be born. Panic surged through Eden as he rushed forward, hammering the specially made glass with all his strength. Bang, bang, bang. Strike after strike, the heavy blows made the tank tremble violently. But it still had no effect. Yusuf's raspy voice echoed, a triumphant sneer on his face. Fool, you've missed your best chance. Now, nothing can stop the offspring of the many-eyed god from being born. That was his true goal. Even if it cost him everything, he would ensure that great being was born. Yusuf stared at the chaos embryo with fervor in his eyes, even a trace of affection hidden deep within. For it was the blessing of the many-eyed god, his greatest creation, his child. And it would carry on his will, fanning the flames of revenge. Until everything the Grant family held dear was destroyed. Yusuf, Watching Eden frantically hammer at the glass, was filled with glee, taunting him endlessly. Struggle like the clown you are. But everything you do is in vain. You and everything you hold dear, including those pathetic commoners you care for, will die in extreme suffering. And all of it will be because of your incompetence. Damn it. Eden's mind was entirely focused on the glass in front of him. He gathered all his strength and slammed his shoulder into it, but it still didn't budge. Quickly changing tactics, Eden used his psychic energy to wrap lightning around the heavy steel platform, swinging it around like a hammer throw and hurling it at the glass. Boom! The steel platform smashed into the glass, further deepening the cracks. It was working. Excited, Eden again wrapped the steel platform in lightning and swung it even harder. One more hit and the glass would shatter. Yusuf, panicking, roared with bloodshot eyes, "You bastard, stop!" But there was nothing he could do to stop it. Eden swung the platform at full force and hurled it toward the tank. Just as the platform flew through the air, the black eyes on the Chaos Embryo stopped twitching. Every eye focused on Eden. In an instant, Eden felt countless evil gazes fix on him, as if he had fallen into a pit of snakes, cold, slithering bodies crawling all over him. It was too late. The massive glass incubation tank exploded, the shockwave sending the steel platform flying. Both Eden and Yusuf were thrown back, skidding across the ground. Yusuf struggled to look toward the tank, his expression like that of a father witnessing the birth of his child. The blessing of the great many-eyed God, my child, you have finally descended. Chapter 82, The Perfect Revenge. Quick, keep attacking. Seeing the Chaos Embryo inside the massive incubation tank becoming increasingly active, Eden, along with the Imperial guards, intensified their assault. The entire incubation area echoed with the thunderous roars of bolt rifles and anti-armor grenades. Behind them, the Imperial guards in charge of the assault had already assembled the heavy siege rocket launcher. The Imperial guards dragged the heavy siege rocket launcher forward, with its 4 mechanical stabilizers securely anchored to the ground. Then, they loaded armor-piercing rockets and adjusted the barrel to aim at the giant glass incubation tank. The Imperial fiercely pulled the trigger mechanism. Boom! The ground trembled violently, and dust rose into the air. The armor-piercing rocket smashed into the giant glass tank, and with the help of its dual-explosion propulsion system, the adamantium ceramite composite warhead embedded itself deep into the specialized glass. Crack! Large cracks spread across the surface of the specially made glass. It worked. Eden was excited. Aim for the breach and keep firing. No matter how sturdy the material, continuous high-intensity attacks will eventually break it. One more shot, and they could destroy this specialized glass. Then, they could deploy thermite bombs in large quantities, sending that grotesque Chaos Embryo straight to hell. The Imperial guards quickly loaded another armor-piercing rocket. But just as the Imperial pulled the trigger, Eden's instincts flared with a sense of danger. Defend. But it was too late. A heavy steel platform came crashing down with tremendous force, smashing the heavy siege rocket launcher and sending both the launcher and the guard nearby flying. The impact carved a long trench into the ground. The newly fired armor-piercing rocket veered off and exploded against the ceiling. A large hole was blown into the ceiling, sending burning cables and fragments of metal cascading down like a rain of fire. Ah, so this is the feeling of power. Such a marvelous sensation. Let us give thanks to the many-eyed God for this blessing. Yusuf spread his arms in ecstasy, emerging from the fiery rain with his enormous body, standing in front of the giant glass incubation tank. Now standing nearly 3 meters tall, his muscles bulged and writhed, with an additional pair of eyes on his forehead, shoulders, and palms, making him look especially grotesque. Behind him, about a dozen more cyborg guards appeared, their appearances resembling Yusuf. Yusuf was brimming with pride. He pointed at Eden and sneered. "Pitiful weakling, are you ready to die?" Eden sneered back. "Have you ever heard the saying, villains die from talking too much?" Yusuf, unperturbed, responded like a theater actor. "Villain, I am the king of Urth, and you, in my eyes, are nothing more than a pathetic clown desperately struggling. You're terrified, aren't you? Terrified of the true offspring of the many-eyed God descending upon this world. You're like a clown, bouncing around before me, trying to stop it. But sadly, you can't stop it anymore. You've failed. Destroy the target." Eden had no time for more nonsense and gave the order, drawing his sword and charging toward the giant glass tank with the guards. "Stop them." Yusuf gave his command as well. The cyborg guards intercepted the charging guards, engaging them in battle. Even with chainswords buzzing in their hands, the cyborg guards, corrupted by chaos energy, were not easily killed. The sounds of chainsword roaring and heavy blows echoed throughout the area. Yusuf's target was Eden. He slowly advanced. Feel the fear. I will personally crush you, worthless being, and thus end the shame of the Hoffman family that has lasted for 3,000 years. This will be the perfect revenge on the Grant family. What? You treacherous fool dare talk of revenge against your master? Eden was confused, having many gaps in his memory due to his soul's transmigration. He knew little of the Hoffman family's history. From what Bayev had told him, the Hoffman family was the vassal family of the Grants. On the planet Earth, their status was second only to the Grant family. And this status was granted to them by the Grants. The Grant family gave them power, protection, and allowed them to enjoy 3,000 years of wealth and privilege on Earth. But they shamelessly betrayed the Grants during their time of weakness. They amassed private forces and seized large portions of the Upper Hive's territory. Worse yet, they treacherously opened the gates and lift shafts, letting the heretical rebels into the Upper Hive, causing catastrophic damage. What? Yusuf was momentarily stunned. It was clear Eden knew nothing of the Hoffman family's history. How could this be? The true history of the family was a mandatory subject for every heir, as understanding it helped them better control themselves and their related families. If this worthless man didn't know these things, wouldn't the revenge be incomplete? The more Yusuf thought about it, the more unsettled he became. He couldn't help but explain. Absurd. The Hoffman family was not a vassal. The Grant family and the Hoffman family have a deep-seated blood feud. 3,000 years ago, your Grant family shamelessly took away. Do I look like I care? Eden interrupted. To him, such ancient disputes were none of his concern as someone who had transmigrated from another world. And in an argument, the worst thing you can do is follow your opponent's pace, especially when their mind is clearly troubled. You're the one who slaughtered your own family. By all accounts, you should be the Hoffmans' biggest enemy. Why don't you avenge them? Yusuf was momentarily speechless. Eden's logic was sound, and he had no way to refute it. Eden, now mocking, went full force. What? My suggestion is that you take your own life as an apology. Why you're asking for death. All Grant family members deserve to die. Yusuf's long-held belief began to collapse. He was enraged, his words disjointed. His muscles suddenly bulged, and he charged forward. Yusuf, now immensely powerful, sent two custodians flying as they tried to intercept him and rushed straight at Eden. He intended to brutally kill this sharp-tongued foe. Protect the governor. Carter raised his chainsword to block Yusuf's charge. Yusuf's fist slammed into Carter's chainsword, turning his hand into a bloody mess from the whirling teeth. But he didn't care. Tendrils of flesh quickly sprouted from his mangled hand, binding Carter and his chainsword tightly. Carter immediately activated the sword's force field. But before it could fully ignite, he and the chainsword were lifted into the air, taking several brutal blows to the chest, spraying blood. Then, both Carter and his chainsword were hurled into a nearby control console. This all happened within seconds. In the next moment, Yusuf was standing right before Eden. Yusuf looked down at him, the 8 eyes on his body rapidly shifting, finally locking onto Eden with a cold, snake-like gaze. The overwhelming pressure made Eden's hair stand on end. Now, no one can save you. Yusuf's muscles bulged, then contracted, as he raised both arms high, gathering all his strength to crush Eden. Die. Boom. After the strike, Yusuf's pupils contracted to slits. Impossible. Eden had raised his forearm and blocked the blow, the sheer force cracking the ground beneath his feet. Yet he stood firm, his breathing steady. Is it possible, and I mean possible, that I am the strongest being here? As his words fell, golden light gleamed from his eyes. Brilliant golden armor crackled with fine lightning bolts, as if a god had descended. Chapter 83, Praise the Sun. As the steam from the shattered giant incubation tank dispersed, a hoof, burning with malevolent fire, stepped forward, its color-changing flames scorching the ground. When it fully emerged in front of everyone, they couldn't help but hold their breath. By its appearance and aura alone, it was clear this was an extremely unusual and powerful chaos creature. It was a formidable chaos war beast, nurtured by Yusuf through vast amounts of nutrients and life sacrifices. Standing nearly 5 meters tall, its body was covered in black, staring eyes and sharp fangs. Its form was a constantly shifting mass of pseudopods, tendrils, half-formed wings, and clawed limbs, all engulfed in multicolored flames. This was the greatest blessing from the many-eyed god, a divine incarnation, the horror of Tzeentch. Yusuf crawled in front of the abomination, gazing lovingly at it. What magnificent power, my child! With a swift motion, Yusuf felt something slimy wrapping around him. It was the long tongue of the horror. Ah! Yusuf only managed half a scream before being pulled upside down into the creature's mouth, where it began to chew him. The horrifying sound of bones being crushed echoed throughout the incubation zone. Half of Yusuf's body hung outside the maw, feeling his lower half slowly being crushed while flames licked at his flesh. It was an agonizing experience, one of unrelenting pain. Yusuf knew this was his fate, and he chose to accept it calmly. Eat, my child, indulge in this gift. Devour everything you desire. He glared viciously at Eden, laughing maniacally, black blood spilling from his mouth. Fool, you have failed. Prepare to meet your death. You will all die, just like me, in endless pain and suffering, never to be reborn. Thud. Half of Yusuf's body fell to the ground, but he continued to rant. Today, Earth has lost her king, and she will fall into eternal darkness. Splat. The horror, seemingly annoyed by the noisy morsel, slammed an insectoid limb down, piercing through Yusuf's skull. At last, there was silence. The horror of Tzeentch stepped forward, its numerous pseudopods trampling over Yusuf's corpse. It seemed excited, for not far ahead was an even fresher and tastier morsel. That golden little insect must be delicious. Protect the governor. Bang, bang, bang. One of the Imperial guards snapped out of his shock, raising his bolt rifle and opening fire. He shot wildly, bullets embedding themselves in the horror's massive body. But such an attack could hardly harm the gigantic chaos beast. It was no more than a mosquito bite. Annoyed, the horror spewed a burst of malevolent flame, burning the guard to ashes. Another custodian swung his chainsword, slashing into the horror's pseudopod, causing a spray of dark green liquid. But the next moment, his body was impaled by multiple sharp insectoid limbs. Before dying, the guard detonated an armor-piercing grenade. Boom! The explosion tore his body apart, but only managed to sever one of the horror's pseudopods. The horror didn't seem to feel any pain. The lost limb visibly regrew. Such a powerful chaos creature filled everyone with dread. Yet, none of the Imperial guards retreated, for protecting the governor was their sole purpose. Even if they could only slow the creature down for a moment, it would be worth it. For the governor, charge. Carter, covered in wounds, raised his chainsword, preparing to lead the remaining guards in one final charge. To give everything for the governor. Stop. However, Eden halted the brave guards. To him, life was nothing more than fuel, but these Imperial guards were far too valuable to be wasted in a futile charge. Eden walked over to Carter. Give me the sword. Before Carter could react, Eden had taken the chainsword, known as the Gut Ripper. This was a real weapon, the golden power sword he had before was just for show. Dragging the chainsword, Eden walked to the front, placing himself between the custodians and the terrifying horror of Tzeentch. As he walked, he commanded, all guards retreat and form a defensive line with the battle units in the rear. Watching the governor's back, all the Imperial guards felt a deep sense of shame. Their strength was too weak, they couldn't even protect their governor. This was such a failure and disgrace. They would rather die here. Governor. Carter's voice trembled, wanting to say something. But Eden didn't look back. That's an order. Obey it. Trembling, Carter and the guards wept. Finally, Carter gritted his teeth. Retreat. Form a defensive line at the rear. Obedience was also a guard's duty. The governor's orders could not be disobeyed. Carter led the guards toward the exit. They would follow the governor's command and build a defensive line with the advancing battle units at the rear. As they reached the exit, Carter took one last look back. He saw the governor striding forward toward that terrifying beast. He believed that the governor, chosen by the God Emperor, would surely have a way to deal with this abomination. After the guards retreated, the only ones left in the incubation zone were Eden and the horror of Tzeentch. The horror reared up, looking down at Eden with keen interest, feeling incredibly excited. That delicious-looking little bug had willingly walked into its grasp. Eden gazed up at the towering horror of Tzeentch, completely unafraid. Instead, a fierce battle spirit ignited within him. He twisted the valve on the chainsword, igniting the promethium fuel, causing the weapon to roar to life. With another twist, the chainsword's power field activated. A blue energy field enveloped the sword's teeth, arcs of electricity crackling between the blades. At the same time, golden lightning erupted from Eden, enveloping the chainsword, turning it into a radiant golden sword. Golden lightning crackled around him, raising clouds of dust from the ground. If there were any fans nearby, they would surely shout, "Golden Giant." Seeing the golden bug's aura suddenly intensify, the horror of Tzeentch became serious. This was a formidable enemy. It raised all its sharp limbs, ready to strike. Eden gripped the golden chainsword with both hands, assuming an attack stance. Against the backdrop of the colossal horror of Tzeentch, his figure seemed so small, yet so divine and fearless. Hiss! The horror shrieked, all its sharp limbs stabbing forward. And Eden swung his sword. In the Ecclesiarchie's cathedral in the King's Court district, the cherubim floating in the air clutched each other, trembling and shouting in strange voices. They were more terrified than ever before. Bishop Donnie, hunched over, knelt before the shrine of the God Emperor, praying. Originally, he had planned to participate in this battle to purge the heretics, but the governor had refused, citing his old age. Yes, he was old. In truth, Eden didn't want Donnie, the last preacher of Urth, to die on the battlefield after all he had done for this planet. At this moment, Bishop Donnie's body trembled slightly. He could feel it, something terrifying had descended. A deep darkness was encroaching. What a blasphemy this was! He was furious, yet powerless. For he was too old, ravaged by injury and illness, unable to fight for the God Emperor, unable to deliver judgment upon the damned chaos heretics. Now, more than ever, Bishop Donnie yearned for strength, and he prayed devoutly. Great God Emperor, your loyal servant begs for your protection. Bishop Donnie prayed endlessly, his forehead bloodied from bowing, and when he raised his head again, he was stunned. For in the void, he saw a sun, shining with a light so holy and warm. Tears streamed down Bishop Donnie's face. The God Emperor had answered the prayers of his most faithful servant. Praise the Sun. Chapter 84, The Blessing. From within the decrepit building above the secret laboratory, loud banging sounds echoed, shaking the entire structure as if it were trembling under the intensity of the battle. Boom! Suddenly, the ceiling of the old building was violently pierced, and a golden figure flew out at high speed, crashing hard into the nearby ruins, sending debris flying everywhere. Cough cough. Eden lay in the rubble, coughing. His armor was damaged, with a small dent in the chest plate. He struggled to stand, using his chainsword for support. Just as he managed to get back on his feet, the dilapidated building ahead collapsed with a loud crash, kicking up a cloud of dust. Through the dust, an ominous glow shone, and the sound of sharp limbs tapping against the ground grew closer. It was the horror of Tzeentch, crawling out from the laboratory. Good, you're pretty fast, Eden gritted his teeth, grabbed his chainsword, and charged back into the dust cloud. Let's see you handle this. Clang, thunk, dwang. A chainsword flew out of the dust cloud, and a moment later, Eden came flying out even faster, crashing into the ground and carving a deep trench. Governor Carter, who had been coordinating the defensive line, saw the governor crash down ahead of them and immediately rushed over to help. I'm fine, just give me a hand. With Carter's help, Eden stood up, his body marked with several wounds, looking somewhat battered. His whole body trembled slightly, his muscles ached intensely, and he could no longer fight. As expected, this body's physical condition and combat awareness weren't strong enough. But this was already the limit of what he could achieve for now. After all, not long ago, this body was so weak it could barely walk, and now, after being strengthened by the power of hope, it had reached a point where it could stand against the horror of Tzeentch in direct combat. The speed at which he had grown stronger was already fast enough. Besides, combat wasn't his true strength in the warp. His abilities were better suited to staying in the back, developing his power, and letting his warriors fight for him. Hiss. The horror of Tzeentch hissed as it approached, covered in injuries of varying sizes, with part of its massive claw missing. Its numerous eyes glowed red with anger. That pesky golden insect had managed to hurt it, even if only slightly, and that was absolutely intolerable. No matter where this little insect hid, it would catch him and devour him piece by piece. In the King's Court district, various forces had finished dealing with their respective targets and had regrouped to build a defensive line to stop the horror. The soldiers trembled at the sight of the terrible creature, its evil flames glowing in the distance. Just the aura it emitted was enough to terrify them. Yet, not a single person retreated. They were prepared to die, determined to stop this monstrous chaos beast. Open fire. Eden coldly commanded, his eyes locked on the horror. Z's. K's, leading the long-range sniper team, fired an energy cannon, and the beam struck one of the horror's limbs, halting its advance. The energy beam left various wounds across the horror's body. Then, a dozen armored tanks charged forward, their turrets firing continuously at the creature. Die, you damned monster. Eri, with one foot planted on a tank's turret, wielded an oversized machine gun, spraying bullets at the horror's eyes, his massive muscles glistening in the sunlight. The horror noticed Eri and spat a ball of malevolent flame in his direction. But the fireball narrowly missed, just grazing Eri's head. Question mark. The horror was baffled. Why had that sure-hit attack missed? Eri, unfazed, continued to have the time of his life, jumping off the tank and charging directly at the horror with his machine gun. Ah! Immortal Eri, charge! He roared as he sprinted beneath the horror, spraying bullets continuously, the massive shell casings clattering to the ground. Though the bullets did little damage, they infuriated the horror. How dare this little insect provoke it? This attack had fully drawn the horror's hatred away from the defensive line. It stopped advancing and turned its focus to Eri, the ground shooter. Crush this annoying bug. The horror glared down at Eri, lifting its sharp limbs and stabbing fiercely. But Eri rolled out of the way, and the limb slammed into the ground, missing him entirely. The horror became even more enraged, rearing up and stabbing wildly with a dozen limbs. The sharp limbs turned the ground around them into rubble. Finally, the horror paused, expecting to see the pesky insect dead. Bang! A shotgun blast hit the horror's face. Eri stood there, holding a shotgun from who knows where, a trail of smoke rising from the barrel. The horror froze, staring blankly at Eri, the atmosphere suddenly awkward. Soon, a visible expression of anger appeared on the horror's face. Its features twisted, and smoke began to rise from its mouth. Hiss! Malevolent flames erupted from the horror's mouth. The evil fire spread, covering everything in the area, scorching everything it touched. No mortal could survive such a concentrated attack. And yet, for the governor, somehow, Eri had climbed onto the horror's body, roaring as he hacked away with his chainsword, slashing wildly at the creature. Whoa! Even Eden couldn't help but be impressed by Eri's fearless display. This guy was going to become a future legend for sure. Seeing this, the soldiers' morale surged, and they launched an even more ferocious attack. But unfortunately, Eri's strength was still lacking, and he couldn't inflict significant damage on the horror. The horror seemed to grow tired of dealing with this annoying insect, throwing Eri off with a violent shake before charging straight toward Eden. It could sense that consuming this golden insect and absorbing its energy would allow it to evolve to an even higher level. The horror could barely contain its excitement. It flipped over the armored tanks in its path, its malevolent flames scorching the soldiers on the front lines. Nothing could stop it. Governor, we must retreat. Carter urgently requested Eden to fall back. The governor's safety was paramount. But Eden refused. The upper hive was already sealed off, and there was nowhere to run. If they abandoned their position now, it would be even harder to mount a defense later. Besides, the horror's target was him. If he fled, the creature would follow him to the King's Court district, causing even greater devastation. The best course of action was to finish it here. Though this so-called chaos-blessed horror of Tzeentch was terrifying, Eden still had a trump card. After all, he was a god. Even though he wasn't at his peak, he still possessed part of a god's power. Before entering the secret laboratory, he had accumulated 1 million points of hope energy, which he used to bless a powerful warrior. All Eden needed to do now was hold off the horror until that warrior arrived. Whoosh! A sharp sound pierced the air. Eden looked up toward the sky and saw a strike ship hurtling in from the direction of the King's Court district. He had arrived. Chapter 85, Judgment Approaches. The strike ship roared through the sky, hovering midair. The hatch slowly opened, and faint sounds of devout prayers could be heard. 2 cherubim flew out, loudly reciting hymns of praise to the God Emperor. Standing in the doorway was an elderly warrior, his beard and hair completely white, his face marked by the wear of time. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open, revealing a hawk-like gaze. It was Donnie Moore, the last bishop of Urth, the aged priest who had been blessed by Eden as a mighty warrior. This devout follower of the God Emperor, hailing from Holy Terra itself, had once charged into battle alone, slaying a chaos high priest with his great axe and saving the King's Court district. Unfortunately, that battle left him gravely wounded, suffering constant pain, and turning him into a frail, hunched old man. When the Chaos heretics invaded the king's court once again, Bishop Donnie was filled with anguish. He could no longer fight for the God Emperor, unable to deliver judgment upon the damned heretics. All he could do was pray, begging the God Emperor to turn his gaze upon them. And then, to his amazement, the great God Emperor had indeed answered his prayers. The Emperor had cast his gaze upon him. That radiant golden sun shone with a light so brilliant and warm. Tears flowed from Bishop Donnie's face as he received this blessing. The warm light healed his wounds, restoring his strength. His body was revitalized, even stronger than during his prime. He could fight again. Such power, praise the sun. Once his combat abilities were restored, he rushed to the battlefield. Bishop Donnie now wore heavy ecclesiarchal power armor, draped in a white hooded robe marked with a cross. A rosary in the shape of a cross adorned his chest, and his waist held a white skull and the sacred words of the God Emperor. Most striking of all was the massive power axe strapped to his back. As the hatch fully opened, Bishop Donnie locked eyes on the chaos abomination wreaking havoc below. He raised his mechanized arm, gripping his eagle staff adorned with strips of scripture, and loudly proclaimed the Emperor's commandment. Only death is the answer. Death to all. Boom. Bishop Donnie leapt down, landing heavily in front of the horror of Tzeentch. The sudden impact caused the creature to pause. It stopped in its tracks, glaring with hostility at the armored warrior who had descended from the sky. Bishop Donnie planted his staff into the ground and drew the massive power axe from his back. With a loud hum, the power field of the axe activated, and blue energy engulfed the entire blade. With cold determination, Bishop Donnie charged the horror of Tzeentch, gripping the power axe in both hands. In the name of the great God Emperor, all heretics shall be judged. As Bishop Donnie reached the horror, he swung the axe down with tremendous force. The strike cleanly severed one of the horror's claws, spraying dark green fluid everywhere. The horror screeched in pain and retreated, spewing a wave of malevolent fire to engulf Bishop Donnie entirely. But soon, the hum of the power axe could be heard again, and Bishop Donnie emerged from the flames. Protected by the power field of his rosary, the vile energies of the flames couldn't harm him. With another swing, Bishop Donnie severed several of the creature's limbs. Enraged, the horror of Tzeentch charged forward, locking itself in a fierce and deadly melee with the priest. Blood and green fluid sprayed in all directions as they clashed. Despite the intense onslaught, Bishop Donnie's attacks grew even fiercer. He shouted the God Emperor's commandments, fearless in the face of battle. Only death. Gradually, the horror of Tzeentch became more and more grievously wounded, and fear flickered in its many eyes. The warrior before it was relentless, utterly fearless. It was terrified. Hiss. Feigning another attack, the horror sprayed its flames to obscure its retreat, then turned and fled. Its many legs scrambled furiously, moving so fast they left afterimages behind. It was desperate to escape, to get away from this terrifying warrior. But it was too late. Case fired an energy beam from his cannon, striking the creature's vulnerable limbs. The horror stumbled, its movements disrupted, and it fell sideways to the ground. It scrambled to rise and continue its escape. "You damned monster, you're not getting away." Eri, roaring from his command chair, led a group of armored tanks in a reckless charge, ramming the horror once again. The horror of Tzeentch was knocked down once more. Furious, it flipped the tanks in its path, then turned to flee in another direction. "Stop it." Carter and the Imperial guards moved to block its escape route. The guards raised special launchers and fired barbed harpoons into the creature's flesh. The barbed harpoons embedded deeply into its body, the cables attached to the harpoons held tightly by the guards. The horror's movements were restricted as it thrashed wildly, stabbing its sharp limbs at the guards holding the cables. Thud. Several Imperial guards were impaled, blood spraying everywhere. Yet even in death, they held tightly to the cables, refusing to let go. For the governor. The Imperial guards roared, holding the horror of Tzeentch in place. Earlier, they had been ashamed of their failure to protect the governor. Now, they had a chance to redeem themselves and offer their lives with purpose. They would never let go. The horror of Tzeentch was firmly restrained by the Imperial guards, and not far away, Bishop Donnie rose to his feet once again. Covered in blood, with sparks flying from his damaged mechanical arm, his hawk-like gaze remained as sharp as ever. Bishop Donnie grabbed his power axe, summoning all his remaining strength for one final charge. With a thunderous roar, the horror of Tzeentch raised its head, all of its black eyes reflecting the image of Bishop Donnie leaping high, power axe raised above his head. Heretic, die. Clang. Bishop Donnie's power axe embedded itself in the creature's skull, the energy from the power field obliterating its brain. The horror of Tzeentch let out a shrill death cry, its limbs twitching wildly. After a brief struggle, its body stiffened, and all life left it. Bishop Donnie, covered in wounds, struggled to his feet, his damaged mechanical arm hanging limply. Eden rushed over to support him. "Bishop, are you all right?" Bishop Donnie, somewhat dazed, asked. "The heretic. The heretic has fallen. You've saved the king's court once again. I was merely following the God Emperor's will, delivering judgment upon the heretic." Bishop Donnie gazed at Eden, lowering his head slightly in respect. "Governor, you are the true savior of Urth." The moment the words left his mouth, Bishop Donnie felt strange. Why did he suddenly feel such reverence for the governor? Even a faint sense of awe. But after a moment's thought, he reasoned that the governor was the chosen savior of the God Emperor, so his reverence was justified. What Bishop Donnie didn't know was that this was the influence of Eden's blessing. Eden's essence in the warp was incredibly similar to the God Emperor's power. In a sense, when the God Emperor was absent, Eden was the God Emperor. By granting blessings in the Emperor's name, Eden had subtly altered Bishop Donnie's mind. Having received this blessing, the bishop now unconsciously held Eden in high regard. As time passed, this influence would only deepen, and full devotion was not out of the question. Does this seem familiar? Granting power to followers, twisting their minds, this was the way of the Chaos Gods. In truth, as a god of the warp, Eden was not so different from the Chaos Gods. The only difference was that his power was gentler and more benevolent toward humanity. Eden called for a medic to tend to Bishop Donnie's wounds. Meanwhile, the Imperial guards used large quantities of thermite bombs to incinerate the body of the horror of Tzeentch. Thus, the operation to purge the heretics of the Hoffman family was successfully concluded. In the secret laboratory, within the wrecked incubation zone, a charred humanoid mass of flesh suddenly twitched. Chapter 86. I, the Great Yusuf, am still alive. The charred mass of flesh, now reduced to only an upper torso, had multiple puncture wounds where sharp objects had pierced it. Yet, despite these grievous injuries, the body had not lost its spark of life. This was Yusuf, the chaos cultist and ambitious traitor responsible for the immense suffering in the King's Court district. His head was intact, and slowly, tendrils of flesh began to regenerate, knitting themselves back together. Suddenly, sparks flickered from his head, and his eyes snapped open. It turned out that part of Yusuf's brain had been specially modified, allowing him to survive under extreme conditions. Though his face was horribly disfigured, a glint of smugness remained. Ha ha ha, that fool miscalculated. How utterly stupid of him to leave so easily. He never imagined that I, the Great Yusuf, am still alive. As the greatest enemy of the Grant family and the future king of Urth, how could he die so easily? When he realized things were beyond saving, he had already put an escape plan in place. Playing the fool was just a way to lower that idiot's guard. Everything was going according to plan. Yusuf dragged his half-ruined body, struggling to crawl toward a hidden mechanical device. Gripping the edge of the device with both hands, he used his teeth to bite onto a lever, pulling it down with all his remaining strength. With the sound of gears turning, the machine activated. A steel panel on the wall of the incubation zone lifted, revealing a dark, gaping tunnel. This was the secret passage leading to the lower hive and eventually to the underhive. Yusuf let go of the lever, falling to the ground, and began crawling toward the tunnel. He had never been in such a pitiful state before, but this was only temporary. Even though he had lost his territory and power, he still possessed the wisdom and strength granted by the many-eyed god. Yusuf crawled, inching closer to the tunnel. Once he reached the lower hive, he would hide in the chaos-ridden underhive, where he could slowly rebuild his forces. His vengeance was far from over. But soon, Yusuf froze in place. He realized he had miscalculated. In the distance ahead, a shadowy figure was waiting for him. Squeak. It was the mutant gray rat. The intense battle had shattered its containment glass, allowing it to escape. The mutant gray rat hissed, its many black eyes turning red as it glared at Yusuf with hatred. It was furious. This was the human who had caused it so much torment. Yusuf remained still, not daring to make a move. The mutant gray rat crouched low, inching closer. It was preparing to attack. My little pet, Yusuf cooed softly, forcing a smile. I'm your master. I can give you delicious. Squeak. But his words only enraged the mutant grey rat further, the memories of its suffering at Yusuf's hands flashing through its mind. This damned human, the rat was furious. With a roar, the mutant grey rat pounced, sinking its sharp teeth into Yusuf's skull. Its fangs bit through his skull with a spray of sparks, exposing the mechanical components inside. Ah! Yusuf screamed in agony, trying desperately to pry the rat off him, but he was powerless. The mutant grey rat continued gnawing, tearing through flesh and bone. After a few moments of struggle, sparks exploded from Yusuf's head, and his body went limp. The rat feasted on his corpse, its jaws drenched in blood. Once it had eaten its fill, the mutant grey rat looked satisfied. It turned, flicking its tail as it scurried into the dark tunnel, leaving behind a mangled, skeletal corpse. The Underhive of Urth. The Underhive was a wasteland of broken walls and debris, with mountains of garbage and toxic waste piled high, emitting a foul stench. Here and there, deadly green fumes rose into the air. Yet, despite the hazardous conditions, life thrived in the Underhive. Criminals, exiles, gang scum, and scavengers eked out a living in this nightmarish place, surviving on garbage and the flesh of others. Of course, there were also all manner of mutants, mutated creatures, and even abumans. It was a harsh, yet teeming world, larger than both the upper and lower hives combined. Somewhere within the garbage mountain, a clattering noise echoed from a pipe, as if something had fallen down it. Squeak. The mutant grey rat tumbled down the garbage heap, bouncing a few times before standing up again. It was excited. It was free. After its initial disorientation, the rat cautiously surveyed the garbage mountain, wary of potential dangers. Suddenly, a puff of green gas erupted nearby, startling the rat. It cautiously approached, sniffing at the green fumes, and then its expression became one of bliss. What a wonderful smell! With its wariness subsiding, the mutant grey rat began to scurry about, licking and gnawing at everything in sight. It acted like a country mouse that had just arrived in the big city. The rat was filled with happiness. This place was a paradise. It decided then and there that it would make its home here. Squeak, squeak, squeak. However, it seemed this area already belonged to someone else. Several mutated rats emerged from the shadows, their glowing green eyes fixed on the intruder. The leader, a massive mutant rat king, hissed and screeched in warning. This was its territory, and the mutant grey rat had to leave, or it would be bitten to death. But the mutant grey rat had no intention of leaving such a prime location. It lifted its head high. Squeak, 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 squeak. What it was saying in rat language was, "From now on, this is my territory." Perhaps it was because the mutant grey rat had a foreign accent. It wasn't until the third repetition that the mutant rat king finally understood what it was saying. The mutant rat king became furious, baring its fangs as it charged forward. It was going to kill this ugly intruder and defend its honor as the rat king. Seeing this, the mutant grey rat rose up, adopting a battle stance. Fight! The mutant grey rat, strengthened by the essence of chaos, had grown immensely powerful, and its strength was still increasing. It dodged the rat king's attack and, with its large and nimble claws, pinned the rat king to the ground. Crunch! With a single bite, the mutant grey rat snapped the rat king's spine. Squeak, squeak, squeak. The rat king, now torn in two, let out one final screech as it died. Squeak. After killing the rat king, the mutant grey rat turned its gaze to the remaining mutated rats and hissed menacingly. With their king dead, the other rats, intimidated by the mutant grey rat's power, timidly lowered their heads in submission. Seeing the mutated rats bowing to it, the mutant grey rat stood tall, its tiny paws resting on its hips, radiating confidence. From now on, it would be the rat king. And this would be its kingdom. Suddenly, the mutant grey rat had an idea. As king, it needed a title. But what should it call itself? The mutant grey rat thought hard. Then, looking at its unusually large and nimble paws compared to the others, inspiration struck. From now on, it would be known as Bigfoot Rat. This is just a side story, and the next chapter will return to the main plot. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audiobook YouTube channel. Chapter 87, Caught. From this day forward, the radiated and polluted region of the garbage mountain would be ruled by the new Rat King, Bigfoot Rat. Standing atop a high mound, Bigfoot Rat gazed down at the mutant rats below, squeaking loudly, as if giving a speech. The speech concluded with a roar from Bigfoot Rat. The mutant rats were intimidated, lowering their heads and flattening their ears in submission to their new king. Bigfoot Rat had fully established its dominance and was satisfied with the result. After the ordeal, it suddenly felt its stomach growling with hunger. Clang! A noise came from a nearby pile of trash. It sniffed the air, raised one paw, and pointed in the direction of the sound, issuing a garbled command. Food, there! Squeak! With its command, the mutant rats rushed toward the pile. In the corner of the heap was a mutant clad in scrap armor, covered in sores, wielding a staff topped with a skull. Realizing he'd been spotted by the rats, the mutant let out a scream and turned to flee. But it was too late. The mutant rats swarmed him, sinking their sharp teeth into his flesh. The mutant swung his skull staff wildly, managing to kill a few of the rats. But against the overwhelming numbers of mutant rats, such resistance was futile. In no time, he was overrun, torn apart by the ravenous swarm. This was the brutal law of the underhive, survival of the fittest. Death was commonplace here. After the mutant rats killed their prey, they didn't dare touch a bite of the corpse. Instead, they eagerly dragged the delicacy to their king, Bigfoot Rat. The mutant rats offered up the body, then looked at their king with fawning eyes, seemingly awaiting praise. Bigfoot Rat nodded in satisfaction and bent down to feast on the offering. Once it was full, it tossed the remains back to its underlings, allowing them to fight over the leftovers. Excited, the mutant rats fought viciously over the scraps. They bit and tore at one another, leaving bloody wounds in their frenzy to claim a piece of the carcass. Bigfoot Rat watched the chaos with amusement, unconcerned by the violence. Satisfied with the display of loyalty, it turned and, with two of the largest female mutant rats in tow, returned to the former Rat King's palace. In reality, the palace was nothing more than an abandoned transport vehicle. Bigfoot Rat sniffed around, inspecting its new home with contentment. With the two plump female rats, it began to settle in, preparing to father countless offspring and establish a true rat kingdom. Meanwhile, back in the secret laboratory. The dark passage leading to the lower hive and underhive lay open, and next to it lay a skeletal corpse, its bones exposed. This was Yusuf's body, now more than 70% devoured. The skin and flesh of his face had been stripped away, his eyes bulging wide, his mouth agape, with bared teeth visible in a terrifying grimace. The sight was utterly grotesque. It was clear Yusuf had experienced tremendous fear and torment. Yet, slowly, his gaping mouth twisted into a grim, mocking smile. He was still alive. Once again, Yusuf had survived by playing dead. He flipped over and began to crawl, leaving a long trail of blood as he dragged himself forward. The dark tunnel loomed closer and closer, and his excitement grew. As long as he made it inside, he would live. Once his strength returned, he would come back. And when that time came, he would defeat that fool, Eden, and bring even greater suffering to the king's court. Just a little further. Yusuf's trembling hand grasped the edge of the tunnel, and he was moments away from escaping into the lower hive. But suddenly, he froze, his body paralyzed. He struggled, but couldn't move. Was it psychic power? Moments later, someone grabbed his spine and slowly dragged him backward. He watched helplessly as the dark tunnel, his only hope of escape, grew farther and farther away. Yusuf finally broke down. No, please, let me go. But no one heeded his pleas. He was slammed into a wall, then dropped to the ground. Struggling to his feet, he saw the face he hated most. It was Eden, clad in gleaming golden power armor. After dealing with the horror of Tzeentch, Eden had returned to find Yusuf's body. Finishing off enemies was crucial. Especially when dealing with chaos-related foes, the best way to ensure they were truly dead was to burn them to ashes. And of course, one couldn't simply scatter those ashes. That could still cause trouble, light contamination or the creation of new chaos offspring. Having seen Yusuf's tenacity firsthand, Eden wasn't taking any chances. Luckily, he had arrived just in time to catch him. Eden planned to incinerate Yusuf along with the chaos creatures, corpses, purging them with his powers before sealing the remains inside special metal blocks. These blocks would be stored deep underground in a secret vault, ensuring Yusuf couldn't return. Eden sneered at Yusuf, mocking him. Trying to escape, huh? Too bad, you're not going anywhere. Yusuf scowled. If it hadn't been for that damned rat, he would have escaped. With a cold smile, he spat. You fool, you're too late. If it weren't for that wretched. Crack. Eden shoved a skull-marked gag into Yusuf's mouth. The device expanded, clamping his jaws shut and preventing him from speaking. The best way to deal with people like Yusuf was to silence them, leaving them to choke on their own arrogance. Still boasting, "You've failed so many times that it's embarrassing to call you my enemy. Frankly, it's humiliating." Eden's taunts continued. Yusuf's face turned bright red as he struggled, unable to say a word. It was as if he had been in the middle of an argument, only for the other person to block him. He was furious, but had no way to vent. For someone as prideful and arrogant as Yusuf, being silenced was the ultimate torment. After a few more jeers, Eden lost interest in the conversation. Without further ado, he grabbed Yusuf and stuffed him into a transparent container filled with a special liquid. The liquid would suppress chaos energy, preventing Yusuf from regenerating his body. It also intensified the sensation of pain. As soon as Yusuf was submerged in the container, he knew he was doomed. He thrashed about, eyes wide with terror, silently begging Eden for mercy. At that moment, Yusuf finally understood why the ancestors of the Hoffman family had once begged the Grant family for forgiveness. Life was precious, after all. Only by living could one enjoy anything. Yusuf wanted to plead for mercy, but he knew there was no chance left. He would be taken to face judgment as the #1 heretic, in front of the emperor's statue and the people. The Imperial guards fitted a ceramic steel shell around the glass container, sealing it, and prepared to transport Yusuf. As Eden and the others exited the secret laboratory, a group of soldiers armed with flamethrowers marched in. They would use intense heat to cleanse this defiled place once and for all. Chapter 88, Reclaiming the Territory. The soldiers meticulously cleansed the area using high-temperature flames, burning everything suspicious. They even carefully scorched the ground to ensure nothing was left behind. After the soldiers confirmed the area was thoroughly cleared, Eden scanned it with his psychic abilities one last time. Once he was sure there were no lingering chaos remnants, he ordered the lab to be sealed permanently. Eden then extended his psychic senses across the entire Hoffman family territory. He identified traces of chaos and marked them for the Imperial guards and defense forces to eliminate. Most of these chaos traces were left behind by the followers of the Broken Eye cult. Their combat capabilities were weak, and they were quickly wiped out. Unfortunately, the leader of the cult remained elusive, disappearing without a trace. After issuing orders to hunt down the cult leader, Eden turned his attention to a more important matter: the complete dismantling of the Hoffman family's rule and the full reclamation of their territory. Yusuf's slaughter of his family for sacrifices to the chaos gods had already weakened his hold over the territory. Now, with his schemes foiled, his army crushed, and his capture imminent, the remaining forces of the Hoffman family and their vassals had scattered like dust. Eden led the Imperial guards into the Hoffman family's estate, where he swiftly judged and executed those deeply connected to chaos or corrupted by its influence. These people, tainted by chaos, were beyond redemption. The longer they were left, the further they would fall into depravity. Thus, the main offenders, accomplices, and their families were all condemned to death by fire, reduced to ashes. Soon, officials and minor families formerly loyal to the Hoffman family scrambled to pledge their allegiance. While not directly involved with chaos, these individuals had simply worked under the Hoffmans. Now, they begged for the governor's mercy. "Governor, we were forced into this. Great and merciful Governor, we swear our loyalty to you. Death to the Hoffman family. Long live the Grant family. We pledge our absolute loyalty. Governor, you can do whatever you want with us, even with our daughters." Eden, these two need extra monitoring. The surviving officials and vassals from the Hoffman family's structure swore their allegiance to Eden Grant, the governor. Eden neither accepted nor refused their pleas. Instead, he told them to return and wait. He warned them, anyone who attempts to flee will be seen as challenging the king's court, and they will face the consequences. The consequences often involved an explosive end. After all, if they had done nothing wrong and had no ties to chaos, why would they flee? To run was to admit guilt, and punishment was inevitable. The governor's authority could not be challenged. Most heeded this warning, choosing to stay put in their homes, not daring to act rashly. However, a few either foolishly conspired to flee or mount a rebellion. Before their plans could even unfold, Imperial guards kicked down their doors and passed swift judgment. Word of this spread quickly, striking fear into the hearts of others. They now fully understood the message: the king's court would not tolerate disloyalty. Loyalty was everything. The remaining officials waited anxiously for their impending judgment. At Eden's command, Deville, head of the investigation team, arrived from the king's court to handle the scrutiny of all relevant personnel. Deville, dressed in a black uniform with a red armband, was like the embodiment of death. Beneath his warm smile lay a cold-blooded killer, feared wherever he went. Absolute loyalty. Give everything for the governor. These were Deville's frequent mantras. He scrutinized each target's crimes and loyalty with a meticulous process. Those who failed to meet his standards were purged. Some were executed, some exiled. Others had their identities and wealth stripped, reducing them to beggars. In the end, 1/3 of those examined passed and were allowed to serve the governor. These filthy traitors should all be executed. Deville would often grumble in private. But the governor, in his infinite mercy, has granted them another chance to pledge their loyalty. Once his investigation was complete, Deville reported back to Eden. Eden, after reviewing the reports, was quite pleased. You've made great progress and have done an excellent job. For loyal subordinates, Eden was never stingy with praise. Compliments cost nothing, after all. Deville trembled with emotion, nearly moved to tears. All for the governor. For Deville, this was the highest honor. Eden had recognized his hard work. Deville had lived in fear since Eden had once expressed dissatisfaction, saying, "You're not doing so well, especially you." That comment had haunted Deville, keeping him awake at night. He feared his incompetence would shame his family, the Lapp family. But now, he had earned Eden's approval. Once his duties were over, he couldn't wait to share the news with his mother and his sister, Lilith. After delivering his report, Deville respectfully withdrew. Eden also took note of the overly emotional subordinate. Not bad, seems pretty loyal. What was his name again? Does something. Whatever. He'd figure it out next time. There were more important matters to attend to. Reclaiming the Hoffman territory was just the beginning. Much work remained to consolidate control. Looking over Deville's report, Eden noted the individuals who needed to be integrated into the current administrative system of the King's Court. Deciding where to place them and what authority to grant required careful consideration. The sheer number of names made Eden's head spin. Sigh. Turns out he really didn't like dealing with bureaucratic matters. It was more exhausting than the grind of his old life. If not for his body's modifications, sustained by the power of hope, he'd have probably collapsed from overwork by now. Eden tossed the report onto the table. He'd leave it to Bayov to handle. Summoned by Eden, Bayov took the report and assured the governor that he would handle everything appropriately. 3 days later, Bayov completed the task, placing all the necessary personnel into their roles. With that, the Hoffman family was no more. The King's Court's administrative system took control, officially reclaiming the territory. New regional institutions began operating, and industrial sectors were restored to function. The logistics department was tasked with resuming the supply of starch blocks for sustenance. Since the farmlands hadn't yielded crops yet, only basic starch blocks were available for now. The more delicious Type 1 starch bars were reserved for top workers. But the logistics department promised that in 6 months, Type 1 starch bars would be available to all across the reclaimed lands. Even this temporary solution filled the people with gratitude. They had endured starvation for far too long. Claudy, head of the law enforcement department, was also given an important task. He would personally lead the effort to restore order and ensure the new territory's law enforcement was on par with other regions. By the time all this was in place, over half a month had passed. With the reclamation complete, the land was now a part of the King's Court. Finally, Eden announced an important public trial would take place at the Holy Plaza. Chapter 89, Doomed, Treated as Dessert. After completing the administrative tasks of reclaiming the Hoffman family's territory, Eden returned to his Spire estate with the Imperial guards. Sigh, finally I can rest properly. Eden threw himself onto the soft bed in his bedroom, ready for an early night of deep sleep. Tomorrow, he would preside over the grand trial of Yusuf and the other heretics. Work was endless, and rest was precious. Lights out. Within the Imperium warp space. Swirling vortexes of rainbow-colored blackness spun in chaotic patterns, with flashes of massive lightning bolts cutting across the sky. This was a place beyond time, where no physical eyes were needed to perceive anything, and where the laws of reality held no sway. Here, energies of chaos, despair, disgust, violence, and even lewdness permeated the very fabric of existence. Insidious whispers continuously echoed in the air, driving anyone mad. Even tearing out your ears wouldn't help because these whispers penetrated directly into your soul. Everything in this space was composed of the emotions and thoughts of intelligent beings in the real universe. These entities were alive, nightmares that constantly sought to break into reality and give you a loving welcome. Of course, there were a few friendly entities in the warp, such as the Emperor of Mankind, who was imprisoned on Holy Terra, and Eldar gods that emerged only once every 1,000 years. But most friendly entities were weak, hiding in this dangerous dimension to avoid being devoured by chaos forces. Even the slightest exposure to the madness of reality could cause them to fall into depravity. In short, 99% of what inhabited the warp wanted to devour your delicious soul. Eden found himself in just such a predicament. He had only just fallen asleep when the small son of his soul felt a sudden surge of danger. Can't even sleep in peace. My consciousness still has to work. Eden cursed as his awareness snapped back to his soul's core, his tiny son. This core represented his very essence, the key to becoming a god. If his physical body in the real world were destroyed, he could still survive. But if this little son were devoured by some evil entity, it would be game over for Eden. Unfortunately, his small son was still weak, and to the denizens of the warp, it looked like an irresistible dessert. As his awareness fully returned to his son, Eden realized he had been targeted by a malevolent presence. He could see a massive shadow looming in the distance, rushing toward him. The good news, it wasn't a chaos god. The bad news, it was still far stronger than him. He could practically feel the entity drooling, eager to devour this tasty treat. The evil entity moved quickly, revealing its full form as it approached. What the hell? A giant octopus, Eden gasped. Before he could react, the monstrous being opened its massive maw, and several black tentacles lashed out, trying to ensnare his small son. The sheer malevolence radiating from the creature made Eden's scalp tingle. He tried to flee, but it was too late. The entity's speed far outmatched his, and soon, the black tendrils wrapped around his son, immobilizing it. In an instant, the tentacles started dragging his son toward the creature's gaping maw. Crushed by the overwhelming force of the creature's evil power, Eden felt like he was suffocating. This was it. He was done for. But Eden still had a trump card. Controlling his tiny son, he sent a psychic message toward a distant, cold, and powerful light within the warp. Emperor, help. Your most loyal servant is about to be devoured by heretics. The message had barely been sent when, whoosh, a massive psychic wave emanated from that cold sun. The entire area lit up with divine radiance, and in an instant, the black tendrils wrapped around Eden's son began melting away, as if exposed to intense heat. Praise the Emperor. Eden felt a surge of joy. The Emperor was truly mighty, worthy of being called the fifth Chaos God. His power was overwhelming. As the black tentacles disintegrated, the distant evil entity let out a painful, pitiful wail, begging for mercy. The creature had always feared approaching the terrifying cold sun, but the lure of Eden's small son had been too tempting. It had stayed far away, thinking it could sneakily pull Eden's son over for a quick snack. But even this small attempt had angered the terrifying being. The evil entity turned and tried to flee, but the holy light overtook it with far greater speed. With one final agonized shriek, the entity was vaporized, leaving nothing behind. Eden could sense that the Emperor had crushed the creature like a bug. After dealing with the threat, the cold sun returned to its usual calm state, as if nothing had happened. Emperor, Eden tentatively called out, hoping to establish some rapport. He was now certain that the Emperor was conscious, aware of his existence, and had responded to his plea for help. This meant that the Emperor cared, at least a little, for this tiny human. After all, the Emperor had existed for countless millennia, a godlike figure who had likely grown indifferent to most things. For him to save Eden meant he saw some value in him. It felt like being treated almost like a son, a status akin to the Emperor's primarchs, who commanded vast armies across the galaxy. But even sons could be unreliable. After all, the Emperor had been betrayed by his son, Warmaster Horus. That betrayal had plunged the galaxy into chaos, with Horus leading a rebellion backed by the four Chaos Gods, severely wounding the Emperor in the process. As a result, the Emperor was confined to the Golden Throne, his body rotting and immobile, unable to speak a word. He could only communicate with his followers through dreams and visions. Meanwhile, his soul projection in the warp had grown ever stronger, burning like a sun for 10,000 years. Without the Emperor's direct leadership, the the vast human empire had grown increasingly backward, ignorant, and disordered. Ironically, they now worshipped the emperor as a god, the very thing he had despised. He was the emperor of mankind, not a deity. But now, it no longer mattered what the emperor thought, his followers did as they pleased. And here was Eden, calling him, God Emperor, at every turn. Of course, Eden had no intention of betraying the emperor. Eden tried calling out a few more times, but the cold sun remained silent. Looking around at the terrifying energies swirling in the warp and then at the distant cold sun, Eden began to feel a deep unease. Sigh. This place was too dangerous, too terrifying. And his little son was still too far from the emperor. What if an even stronger entity showed up one day and he didn't have time to call for help? Eden carefully guided his tiny son and sent another psychic plea toward the cold light. Boss, can I get a little closer to you? Chapter 90, almost crashed into the emperor. Unfortunately, Eden's psychic call received no response. The cold sun that represented the emperor floated quietly in the Imperium. Its endless psychic energies radiated divine light equally over everything. Eden was used to this by now, so he had just asked politely. Since the emperor hadn't objected, that basically meant permission had been granted. His life was the priority, so he needed to get closer to the emperor's son to ensure his safety. With that decision made, Eden immediately directed his small son to fly toward the cold sun. His small son was painfully slow, moving at a snail's pace. He sighed, grateful for the emperor's protection. At this speed, he wouldn't be able to escape danger in the Imperium otherwise. The small sun continued its slow journey, inching its way across the warp space. It took an incredibly long time, but eventually, Eden's son approached the vast cold sun. As he neared, the cold sun became so enormous that it filled his entire vision. To give a sense of scale, Eden's small sun was already quite large in the warp, about half the size of Earth's moon. But the Emperor's cold sun was at least 400 times larger. This gave Eden a sense of awe at the sheer magnitude of what he was witnessing. Of course, physical laws didn't apply in the Imperium, so these sizes were just conceptual projections of energy. Looking at the distance, Eden felt it was still too far. He wasn't safe enough yet. So, he kept flying, moving his small sun closer to the cold sun. Judging by the remaining distance, Eden estimated it would take a while longer to reach his target, so he decided to take a nap. Controlling this thing was exhausting. He set the direction on autopilot. After all, in this region of the Imperium, it was just his small sun and the cold sun. There didn't seem to be anything else. However, as soon as Eden dozed off, he fell into a peculiar sleep. Dreaming in the Imperium was a strange experience. Twisted energies of lust, chaos, and madness crept into his dreams. This place was too corrupt, forcing him to dream of such terrible things. By the Emperor, Eden swore to himself. These aren't my thoughts. He tried to resist, but it was futile. These nightmares invaded directly into his soul. He couldn't avoid seeing them. At first, the dreams were somewhat tame. But when the Battle Sisters started fighting against multiple tentacled demons, Eden knew this dream was taking a dark turn. And what followed was even more unspeakable, with a certain infamous chaos god and even the Emperor himself joining the scene. Even Eden, who had seen a lot, was stunned, muttering, "Praise the Emperor," repeatedly. This is not right. As Eden was mentally criticizing the unfolding dream, a sudden surge of psychic energy slapped him awake. The next thing he felt was a crushing psychic pressure, as if an entire planet were bearing down on him. Eden's consciousness snapped back to full alert as he looked in the direction of the pressure. Oh crap, too close. His small sun had overshot its course, getting too close to the cold sun. The vast golden sphere now filled his entire field of vision, like a massive wall. The immense psychic aura from the cold sun's corona overwhelmed Eden. Luckily, Eden reacted just in time. Stop. I'm about to crash. With all his strength, he managed to brake, narrowly avoiding a collision. That was close, way too close. Eden was nearly scared to death. If he had crashed into the sun, just the loose psychic energy radiating from it would have severely injured his small son. Not only that, but it would have been the biggest offense against the Emperor since Horus' betrayal. If word got out, the entire Imperium would be in an uproar. The Ecclesiarchy, the Inquisition, and even the Primarchs would scour the galaxy to find Eden and subject him to 100 trials. Crashing into the Emperor, what blasphemy! A trial would be inevitable. Luckily, he had stopped in time, avoiding such a sacrilegious act. Once the small sun had fully stopped, Eden carefully maneuvered it backward, retreating to a safer distance. Finally, when his small sun was securely positioned at a safe distance, Eden sighed in relief. He finally felt safe. Now, no evil entities would dare come near him with the Emperor's protection. After calming down, Eden suddenly remembered, hadn't the Emperor just given him a psychic slap to wake him up? He looked at the cold sun, which remained as serene as ever, as though nothing had happened. But Eden knew the Emperor had nudged him, saving him from crashing. It was clear now, the Emperor cared about him, even going as far as to intervene personally to prevent him from getting hurt. Such kindness, it was almost too much. Not even the Primarchs, the Emperor's sons, received this kind of treatment. Why was the Emperor being so kind to him? Eden was filled with doubt. A thought began to creep into his mind. Could it be, the Emperor wants me to grow strong enough to sit on the golden throne for him? The idea terrified him. Becoming the lamp of humanity, on holy Terra, guarding the Imperium for eternity, was an unimaginable burden. Eden couldn't possibly take on such a role. This made him appreciate the Emperor even more. The Emperor truly cared for humanity, enduring his fate on the golden throne to protect the species. He is a true saint. Eden silently vowed that once he became powerful enough, he would do his best to protect humanity and ease the Emperor's burden. As for sitting on the golden throne himself, no, thank you. The Imperium still needed the Emperor. If the Emperor ever did insist that he sit on that golden seat of power, well, Eden could hardly refuse. But for now, that was a distant future. Eden wasn't nearly powerful enough for that kind of responsibility. It would take him conquering hundreds of worlds and much more just to stand among the giants of the galaxy. He was a long way from being able to take the Emperor's place. And by the time that day came, thousands of years might have passed. So, Eden wasn't worried about it. For now, he just needed to develop under the Emperor's protection. With this connection, no one could question his status as the Emperor's chosen. In the future, he could confidently declare himself one of the Emperor's spokespeople. Eden knew he had to seize this opportunity and use his small son's abilities to conquer planets, lead expeditions, and rescue the Imperium's dark corners. Through faith and conquest, he would grow stronger, ensuring that his flesh remained intact and avoiding the fate of becoming another cold sun in the Imperium. For now, however, Eden just wanted to finish watching the rest of that dream. He had been at a rather crucial scene. Just as Eden prepared to drift back into his dream, a massive psychic wave suddenly surged toward him. 1. Check out our playlist for more amazing novels. Continue. Chapter 91, The Raid Plan. The surge of psychic energy crashed violently, ejecting Eden's consciousness from the warp. The intense impact caused his mind to reel, and soon he fell into unconsciousness. This time, Eden truly slept, lying comfortably in his bed, deeply at peace. Meanwhile, within the warp, perhaps it was a 1 in a billion chance. A ship sailing through the warp had its navigator, who bore a third eye on his forehead, suddenly sensed something amiss. He immediately called the ecclesiarch aboard the ship. Soon, both the navigator and the ecclesiarch gazed through the ship's viewport and bore witness to a divine miracle. It was the Holy Sun. All praise and glory to the magnificent Sun. With great reverence, they watched the Holy Sun shining in the far distance, praying fervently for the Emperor's blessing. Legends told that such an unparalleled fortune would ensure the ship's safe journey through the warp. But then, they noticed something unusual. By the Emperor, how could there be another sun beside the glorious Holy Sun? The navigator and the ecclesiarch were both stunned. They exchanged a glance, rubbing their eyes to confirm they weren't mistaken. The sheer shock of the sight left them reeling, almost driving them mad. What on Terra was happening? Why were there two holy suns? Who was this other one? This didn't align at all with the sacred doctrines of the Imperial Creed. Could the creed be wrong? The ecclesiarch's legs weakened, gripping his staff tightly to steady himself. He muttered endlessly, as though his very faith had been shattered. O Emperor, what in his name was happening? A wild thought suddenly flashed through the ecclesiarch's mind, causing him to exclaim. Could it be that the Emperor himself? Thankfully, he clamped his hand over his mouth, stopping the blasphemous words from escaping. Such heretical thoughts, uttering them would be grounds for burning at the stake. The ecclesiarch, filled with regret, burst into tears, falling to his knees and begging for the Emperor's forgiveness. However, when he lifted his head again, both holy suns had vanished. In their place, only a swirling vortex of chaotic warp energy remained, everything returning to normal. Afterward, the ecclesiarch and the navigator swore, by the emperor's name, that they would take this secret to their graves. Such a heretical revelation must never see the light of day, or they would face the most brutal of inquisitorial trials. While Eden had been struck down by the emperor's psychic force and slept deeply, the Grey Wolf Warband's territory stirred with unrest. The Grey Wolf Warband was nominally the ruler of this region, but only nominally. In truth, this area was governed by dozens of different gangs, with the Grey Wolf Warband being the largest force among them. They had no organized military, their operations were chaotic, and they were the weakest of the three major factions within the Hive. They hadn't been wiped out only because the King's Court and the Hoffman family were in a deadlock, unable to spare resources to deal with them. Additionally, governing the area was costly, and with strong enemies nearby, conquering it would only drain their strength, giving rivals an opening. Now that the King's Court had defeated the Hoffman family, they were free to turn their attention to the Grey Wolf Warband. Their goal, to unify the Hive under their rule. In fact, shortly after Eden crushed the Hoffman family, he had already ordered the Custodes and the defense forces to prepare their troops. The command was to crush the Grey Wolf Warband. Eden set a deadline. Before Judgment Day, the Warband's leader and key figures had to be captured. On that day, these traitors and heretics would face their final judgment. The gangs within the Grey Wolf Warband's territory weren't particularly strong. The main issue was their scattered nature. A large-scale military mobilization would likely alert the gangs, making things more difficult. To counter this, Carter, Aerie, and Kays had spent many days planning and ultimately decided on a swift decapitation strike. They would lead elite warriors in tactical squads, raiding the gang territories within the Grey Wolf Warband's region. Their mission, to eliminate the leaders and key figures. Tonight, the tactical squads would infiltrate the Grey Wolf Warband's lands. For the past 2 weeks, the King's Court had made no visible moves. This lull had lulled the gangs into a false sense of security, allowing them to return to their usual, chaotic lifestyles. Many gang members had grown complacent. If not for the Grey Wolf Warband's warnings, they would have completely dropped their guard. To them, a King's Court assault was no different than a turf war with a neighboring gang. If those damn governor's lackeys dare come, we'll just pick up our weapons and fight. One gang leader exclaimed, as he lounged with a gang beauty, covered in demonic tattoos and piercings, at his side. And then he proceeded to do just that. In summary, the infiltration of the King's Court tactical squads went smoothly. Carter and the others donned the same tattered metal cloaks worn by the gang members. Being large and imposing, no one questioned them. This region had so many gangs that it wasn't unusual to see a new one pop up overnight. There were even ogrins bigger than them wearing similar attire. Unless someone wanted to start a gang war, no one bothered them. Plus, the Grey Wolf Warband had declared a ceasefire, making it even less likely for anyone to challenge their authority by sparking a large-scale conflict. This was exactly why Carter, Aerie, and the others chose today to launch their raid. Most gang members were too busy stuffing themselves with half-cooked, questionable meat and drinking a mix of industrial waste and sewage that they called Aryl Ale, drowning themselves in intoxication. Under the cover of darkness, Carter and a handful of Imperial guards made their way toward the Grey Wolf Warband's base. At the same time, other Imperial Guards squads were en route to their targets as well. The King's Court only had this one enemy left in the Hive, so Eden could boldly dispatch the Custodes for combat operations. This time, nearly every Imperial Guards available had been deployed, over 100 warriors. The Custodes would strike at multiple locations across the Grey Wolf Warband's territory, aiming for a swift and decisive victory. As they approached the Warband's base, they began to encounter corpses, posed grotesquely and impaled on stakes. Most of them appeared to be ordinary civilians. The area was also marked with strange, twisted symbols drawn in blood. It was clearly some sort of ritual, meant to intimidate outsiders. Seeing this, Carter's eyes grew cold, and he quickened his pace. Damn scum. Aerie cursed viciously, his eyes filled with murderous intent. Dressed in gang attire, he carried a large shotgun on his back, along with an assortment of weapons and grenades strapped to his body. With his exposed abs and scar-covered frame, he looked more like a gang member than an actual one. Civilians and low-level gang members cowered in fear, giving him a wide berth. Since entering this area, seeing the skeletal remains littering the streets and the strange, mutilated bodies in gang-controlled checkpoints. Orai's rage had been simmering, barely under control. Chapter 92. Chapter 92, No Resistance. The gang members were even more brutal than the Hoffman family. Under their rule, the people lived as if in hell. No one was safe here. Dying from hunger or being killed by a stray bullet on the streets was considered a lucky death. Far worse fates awaited those captured. Some were tortured to death, used as food, or subjected to gruesome rituals where their organs were ripped out while they were still alive. Just a moment ago, Ari had witnessed a product in a meat stall, a person whose limbs had been severed, screaming for mercy before finally succumbing to death. Please spare me, my child still needs me. In the dimly lit streets, a tall gang member with a skull tattoo was dragging a frail woman, ignoring her desperate pleas as he laughed maniacally. Shut up. Come with me and I'll show you a good time. He sneered. Oh Emperor, someone save me. Under the flickering firelight, the emaciated woman looked desperate, pleading for help from the people around her. But no one responded. Other gang members laughed and jeered at the scene, while her neighbors avoided looking, too afraid to draw attention to themselves. Not everyone, though, lacked courage. You. A man struggled to suppress his fear, stepping forward to confront the gang member. However, as the skull-faced thug turned to face him, terror flooded the man's heart, leaving him unable to speak. Bang! The man's head exploded as the gang member fired a large-caliber, homemade weapon at point-blank range. What? You. Speak properly. The thug mimicked the man's stammering, blowing the smoke from his gun's barrel. I hate stutterers. He swept his violent gaze over the crowd. Now, anyone else want to stop me? Step forward. His eyes raked across the street, but no one dared meet his gaze. Everyone knew that this skull-faced thug belonged to the Bone Gang, the second largest gang after the Grey Wolf Warband. No one in their right mind would cross them. Many in the crowd recalled a rumor: the governor's army was supposed to arrive soon. The word was that when the governor's forces arrived, they would kill all the gang members and reward the people with corpse starch rations flavored with wheat. The people prayed for the day the governor's army would come and free them from this nightmare. But reality was cruel. They had waited a long time, and nothing had happened. They were still living in hell. After all, what value did the lives of those living in the filth of this forsaken hellhole hold, for the governor to even bother sending troops to rescue them? A moment passed, and still, no one stepped forward. The skull-faced gang member burst out laughing. You're all cowards. None of you even has the guts to pick up a gun and fight back. No wonder I can push you around. His words only made the people lower their heads even more. After seeing what happened to the brave man, no one else was willing to risk their lives. Even if not for themselves, they had to think of their families, right? Seeing that no one dared oppose him, the gang member grew bored. He slapped the frail woman hard across the face, roughly dragging her away. Come on, I can't wait anymore. He thought about doing it right there on the street, but it was too risky. If a rival gang saw him, they could take the opportunity to kill him, or even these weaklings might seize the moment to take him out. That would be a joke. He would become the laughingstock of his gang. For a gang member, a death like that was more terrifying than dying in a gang fight. That kind of death wasn't befitting a gang member. Gang members were supposed to die in combat. After killing the man, the woman had lost all hope of resisting. Whatever this thug wanted to do to her, she wouldn't fight back anymore. She just wanted to survive, for her child still needed a mother. If she died, her young child wouldn't survive in this world. Of course, most women who were taken to a gang's headquarters were signing their own death sentences. Most were tortured to death. The frail woman had already resigned herself to this fate, her expression hardening with determination. For her child's sake, she would endure any humiliation and find a way to survive. Having made up her mind, she stopped resisting and followed the skull-faced gang member toward the gang's base. Suddenly, the thug turned his head. You bitch. Why aren't you struggling anymore? I'll make sure you. The woman, startled, was just about to say something when she saw the barrel of the thug's gun. Bang! The gun fired, and the woman's face was blown apart by shrapnel. She fell to the ground, her eyes wide open in death, as though still trying to comprehend why the gang member had suddenly killed her. The thug, furious, fired 2 more shots into her corpse. Lowering his gun, he spat on her body with disgust. I'm not interested in obedient women. You thought you could trick me, you disgusting bitch. The people around the scene stared in terror at the madman. They feared he might turn his gun on them next. Mama! The woman's daughter ran over, shaking her mother's body, crying uncontrollably. Mama, what happened? Mama, wake up! The pitiful child's cries made the onlookers feel a pang of guilt. But no one dared to approach, too afraid of the gang member. Little one. Hearing the cries, the skull-faced thug found the scene amusing. He knelt beside the little girl, gently explaining. You don't think she's getting up, do you? She's dead, understand? Pointing to himself, he boasted. I killed her with my own hands. The little girl, filled with hatred, glared at the thug. You're a bad man, I'll kill you. She threw a weak punch at his face, but her small, frail fists did no damage. The thug didn't care. He casually pushed the girl to the ground, aiming his gun at her. Heh, I'll send you to join your mom right now. At this sight, everyone clenched their fists in anger. Damn the gangs. The thug glanced around, seeing no one was going to stop him. He knew it would be this way. These cowards would never dare to challenge him. Suddenly, he felt bored. He pulled the trigger. Bang! But the homemade gun's shrapnel flew into the sky instead. Damn scum. Arai's muscles bulged as he grabbed the thug's arm just in time, redirecting the gun away from the girl. Eri had arrived just in time to save her. The skull-faced gang member stared at Eri. Who the hell are you? You want to start a war with the Bone Gang? Several other Bone Gang members raised their guns, but the thug barked at them angrily. Why are you pointing your guns at me? He's the one trying to save the girl. Shoot her. Chapter 93, You are unworthy of the governor's blessing. December bonus pick winner, starting as a Class 5 mutant. The Bone Gang members immediately aimed their weapons at the little girl. But in the next second, their chests were pierced through, and they fell to the ground one by one. The elite forces of the Imperial Guard had struck. After dealing with the surrounding gang members, the only one left was the skull-faced gang leader held by Eri. With a sudden burst of strength, the skull-faced thug broke free from Arai's grip, retreating to a safe distance. His crazed expression showed a glimmer of reason. As a small leader of the Bone Gang, he didn't seem too afraid. After all, a certain level of cunning had kept him alive through the gang's brutal infighting up until now. Which gang are you from? The skull-faced thug glared at Eri. This is Bone Gang territory. You dare to kill me on a ceasefire day. Not only will your gang be wiped out, but everyone on this street won't survive either. By breaking the rules, you'll have every gang in this area hunting you down. Killing a prominent gang member during a ceasefire was a major taboo. Of course, this only applied during the ceasefire days. On any other day, it didn't matter. The gang leaders simply wanted a time to drink, eat, and enjoy themselves without worrying about fighting. The skull-faced thug noticed that Eri seemed to care about the weaklings around him. He glared menacingly at the civilians, threatening them. Stop them, or you'll all die. Arai's heart burned with rage as he approached the skull-faced thug. This scum had to die today. Don't kill him. Please, don't kill him. Sir, spare us. Stop him, or we're all dead. Suddenly, the crowd found their courage, some begging, others trying to stop Eri, while a few shouted from behind the crowd. Some even raised pitchforks and sticks. Why weren't they afraid of Eri? Maybe they thought he was a good person. For these people, angering the Bone Gang was worse than death. The Bone Gang's tortures and sacrificial rituals were worse than hell. To avoid this terrifying fate, many decided to intervene, hoping to stop those who intended to kill an important Bone Gang member. They couldn't let these people bring ruin to their street. It was as if they had forgotten that Eri had just saved them and that it was the Bone Gang who had been tormenting them all along. Instead, they now saw Eri as the villain. Several civilians pointed their forks and axes at Eri and the Imperial guards. The guards were momentarily stunned. Weren't they here to save these people? How had they suddenly become the villains? For a moment, the soldiers hesitated. After all, the Imperial Guard had recently issued new regulations. The governor had clearly decreed that unless absolutely necessary, they were not to harm civilians who hadn't been proven to be traitors or heretics. There were several clauses explaining this. The most important one was whether the civilians attacked first. At this point, the civilians were only standing off against the Imperial Guard, not actively attacking, so the soldiers couldn't make the first move. Though this rule made things difficult, especially in situations like this, the governor insisted on maintaining the purity of his forces. The guards looked to Eri, waiting for his orders. The skull-faced thug assumed Eri had backed down. After all, no one dared to face the wrath of both the Grey Wolf Warband and the Bone Gang. He shot Ari a scornful look, turning to leave. We'll remember this. Soon enough, your bones will hang on the bone wall. Stop. Ari's voice rang out, barely containing his fury. The skull-faced thug turned back, furious. You bastard. Swish. A black shadow flashed, and he saw the tip of a blood-drenched blade. Then came the warmth in his abdomen, something was spilling out. It was his intestines. Just moments ago, Ari had slashed upward, cutting open the thug's belly. His intestines spilled out. How dare you, you're all going to die. Your bones will be smashed to bits. The thug couldn't believe what had just happened, this damned man had actually attacked him. But the searing pain in his gut confirmed it was real. He dropped to his knees, desperately trying to shove his intestines back into his body. No, my guts, my guts. Due to some mechanical augmentations, the skull-faced thug wasn't dead yet. He helplessly tried to push his intestines back in, only for them to fall out again. You, how could you? Oh no, you're going to get us all killed. Why did you kill him? You monster. We're all going to die, I curse you. The civilians, who had been aiming their forks and sticks at Ari and the soldiers, collapsed into despair, shouting curses at Ari. But Ari remained unmoved, staring down the crowd. So, what now? Are you going to attack me? He had anticipated this situation long ago and had even asked the governor for advice during the planning meeting. The governor's response was clear: good men shouldn't have guns pointed at them. The governor's stance was clear. Anyone who dared to attack any institution or challenge the authority of the king's court would be executed. If these civilians dared to make a move, they would face the wrath of the king's court. The civilians stared blankly at Ari, still too afraid to act. They broke down, wailing and cursing these people for ruining their lives. Hurry up and help me, or you'll all die. The skull-faced thug groaned, demanding the cowards come save him. The civilians snapped out of it, scrambling to help him, but Ari's voice stopped them cold. Don't save him. We are soldiers of the king's court, following the orders of the great governor to rescue you. Ari tore off his disguise, revealing the king's court's uniform, emblazoned with the golden lion insignia. Pointing to the wailing skull-faced thug, he declared, after tonight, the oppression of the gangs will be no more. What you should be doing is taking revenge, kill him. Yet even then, the civilians cowered, too afraid to move. Looking at them, Ari felt a deep sense of disappointment. You are unworthy of the governor's blessing. He understood their cowardice, not everyone had the courage to stand up and fight. But how could people living under such oppression continue to wait for others to fight and save them? The governor had plans to establish a citizen system, where the people of his domain would be divided into classes. Citizens of different levels would receive different resources. Ari fully supported this idea. Those willing to fight for the governor should receive better rewards. But these cowards before him, they didn't deserve the governor's favor. Letting them live was blessing enough. Hurry up, do you want to die? I'll kill you all. The skull-faced thug coughed up a mixture of blood and oil, still threatening them. Finally, some of the people stepped forward. They were the ones who hadn't cursed Ari and the Imperial Guard. They took the weapons from the hands of the cowardly ones and began walking toward the skull-faced thug. Chapter 94, Do You Want to Become Warriors? Seeing the civilians approach with pitchforks, sticks, axes, and other weapons, the skull-faced gang member tried to mask his fear with bravado. What are you doing? Anyone who dares touch me will die. The Bone Gang will rip out all your bones and sacrifice them to the Bone King. When the people were weak, he mocked them as cowards. But now that they were resisting, fear began to creep in, especially at a time like this. Ari scoffed. Bone King. He'd never heard of such a thing. It didn't sound like anything impressive. What had the governor called people like him? Right, small fry. Even so, the crowd hesitated, unsure of what to do, still holding their weapons in confusion. The skull-faced thug seized the moment, searching the ground for his gun. Where was it? Looking for something, scum. Ari's mocking voice echoed. The thug looked up to see that Ari was holding his gun, displaying it intentionally. His gun gone, the thug reached for the blade at his waist. But the blade wasn't there either. That bastard had taken it without him noticing. You bastard, if you've got the guts, kill me now. The skull-faced thug roared. Even in death, he wanted to die by a gang member's hand. He was a bloodbone acolyte of the Bone Gang. He couldn't bear the humiliation of being killed by weaklings, or his brothers would mock him. Even in death, he wouldn't be welcomed back into the arms of the Bone King. Of course, Eri wasn't going to give him what he wanted. He simply stood there, watching. As the thug roared and tried to get up, a heavy blow struck his head. He looked up to see a man holding a large wooden ladle, disbelief etched across his face. "You dare hit me." Then another blow landed on his head. The man with the wooden ladle, his face streaked with tears and filled with hatred, kept striking. This thug had killed his family with a gun, just to test its power. "Die, die, die." The man screamed as he swung. The rest of the civilians, crying out in anguish, rushed forward, attacking the thug with their makeshift weapons. They unleashed the hatred and rage that had been festering inside them for so long. The skull-faced thug went from shouting curses to howling in pain, eventually begging for mercy. But no one would forgive him. In the end, he was beaten into a pulp. Watching the scene unfold, Eri nodded slightly. These people, unlike the cowards, were more deserving of being saved. Eri approached them and asked, "Do you want to become warriors?" Though fearful, the civilians who had killed the thug nodded firmly. They no longer wished to live like sheep waiting to be slaughtered. They wanted to take up arms and fight for their fate. Before long, Eri distributed weapons and ammunition to them, teaching them the basics of how to use them. He declared that they were now provisional soldiers of the Imperial Guard. He promised that once the king's court reclaimed this area, they would officially become soldiers, fighting for the governor. Beep, beep, beep. Suddenly, Eri heard a faint electronic sound. He turned to the skull-faced thug's remains. Amid the mix of flesh and machinery, a device was still functioning, emitting a faint red glow. It was a signal transmitter. At some point, the skull-faced thug had sent a distress signal to the Bone Gang's base. Judging by the distance, those gang scum would arrive soon. Eri didn't panic. He walked over to the little girl who was crying and patted her on the head. "Don't be afraid. Find a safe place to hide, and I'll come back for you later." The girl looked up at Eri with his scary red eyes but felt a sense of trust. She nodded firmly. "Okay." Boom. Just as she answered, an explosion sounded in the distance. Fire lit up the night sky, and the shockwave gently blew through their hair. Screams and rapid gunfire followed soon after. It was coming from the direction of the Bone Gang's reinforcements. Eri had already made plans for this. The Bone Gang's reinforcements had been ambushed by the Imperial Guard. Eri wasn't reckless, he had a plan. Eri hefted his rifle and, alongside the Imperial Guards, ran toward the explosion, ready to join the battle. The newly armed civilians stayed behind. He wasn't about to send untrained civilians into an intense frontline battle. Their job was to handle any gang members who fled in their direction and do what they could. For the governor. In the distance, Arise and the Imperial Guard's battle cries echoed. The roar of gunfire filled the air, signaling the beginning of the assault. Other squads had launched their attacks as well, and the victorious cries spread from every direction. In an instant, the Grey Wolf Warband's territory was engulfed by the flames of the King's Court's offensive, the fires of battle burning fiercely. Hearing the shouts, the civilians grew excited. Some even knelt down. "We're saved. The governor's forces are here to rescue us. Long live the governor." At that moment, the people truly believed the rumors. The governor's army had arrived. They placed their hope in the great governor, believing he would deliver them from their suffering. Perhaps life under the governor would be better. But as the battle continued, the screams of the gang members drew closer, and the people began to worry. What if the gang members made it to this street? They have guns, right? They can protect us. Someone pointed to the provisional soldiers with weapons. The crowd realized this and looked to them with hopeful eyes. The provisional soldiers gripped their lasguns tightly. These were people who had never been valued or respected, and now their eyes were filled with determination. A deep sense of honor welled up within them. They would fulfill Arai's command to protect this street and fight any gang members that tried to flee this way. Suddenly, cries rang out as several injured gang members stumbled toward them from the end of the street. The provisional soldiers were terrified, but under the watchful, expectant eyes of the crowd, they gritted their teeth and charged. Closing their eyes, they unleashed a flurry of wild shots. Kill them. The new Imperial Guard lasguns were powerful, easily cutting through the gang members' metal armor like paper. The gang members didn't even have time to react before they were riddled with bullets and fell dead. Did we win? Long live the governor. The provisional soldiers stood in stunned silence for a moment before realizing what had happened, then burst into tears and cheers. At that moment, they were no longer lambs to the slaughter but warriors who had taken control of their destiny. In the Grey Wolf Warband's base, corpses were piled high, like small mountains. The rotting flesh gave off a nauseating stench. Black swarms of flies buzzed in the air, swarming thickly, as if threatening to engulf everyone. Chapter 95, The Mighty Leader of the Grey Wolf Warband. Boom! Flames roared as an Imperial Guard warrior raised his flamethrower, incinerating the swarm of flies that lunged at them. As the charred remains of the black flies fell to the ground, Carter finally got a clear view of the plaza. Corpses, nailed and mutilated, hung around the square, while rotting flesh piled up, crawling with mutated maggots. His expression darkened even further. Damn heretics, how many people have they slaughtered? The plaza showed clear signs of corruption. If left unchecked, this corruption would likely summon far more terrifying creatures. But fortunately, they had arrived in time. The perimeter still echoed with the roar of chainswords and bolt gun fire. The Imperial Guard soldiers were still engaged in combat. Meanwhile, Carter's elite squad had broken through to the core area, under the cover of the others. They were here to execute a decapitation strike. As the governor's angels of war, they were about to show the heretics the meaning of the Emperor's wrath. A low growl echoed. Carter immediately became alert, drawing his chainsword as he whispered, "Stay sharp." Howls suddenly erupted as several mutated hunting dogs, each over 2 meters long, burst from the shadows, snarling as they charged at the Imperial Guard. The nearest soldier reacted swiftly, raising his bolter and firing. Explosive rounds sprayed toward the beasts. But the mutated dogs were incredibly agile, dodging most of the shots. One of them leapt, vaulting over the soldier with the bolter, slamming into the Imperial Guard behind him, pinning him to the ground. The beast savagely bit at the downed soldier, who used his forearm to shield vital areas while struggling to get up. The mutated dog, however, had a strong suppressive grip, making it nearly impossible for the soldier to break free. It was a terrifying situation. Anyone caught alone by this beast would be torn apart. Thankfully, he wasn't alone. Carter swung his chainsword in a vicious arc, severing the dog's spine, sending blood and flesh flying. The creature let out a final, pitiful yelp before collapsing. But more howls rang out in the distance. Several more mutated hunting dogs were charging at them. "Draw swords," Carter commanded, pulling the downed soldier back to his feet. From the earlier encounter, he knew bolters weren't effective against these agile creatures. The chainswords hummed as the Imperial Guard formed a line, standing firm against the approaching beasts. With the stench of blood filling the air, the Imperial Guard remained unfazed, raising their swords and cutting through the dogs with precision. Blood splattered, and the mutated dogs were hacked to pieces. After dispatching the beasts, Carter quickened his pace, leading the squad toward the warehouse at the far end of the plaza. Boom! Carter kicked open the iron door to the warehouse. The moment the door fell, bang, bang, 2 jets of green fire shot out from inside. Clang! The Imperial Guard shield bearers reacted instantly, raising their massive shields to block the flames. Inside the warehouse, 2 scarred flamethrower troops cheered, cranking their valves to full power, unleashing torrents of fire. Burn! Burn the governor's dogs! Ha ha ha! Clang! 2 small black objects rolled across the floor, catching the flamethrower soldiers' attention. They looked down and realized what they were. One of the flamethrower soldiers cursed. "Damn it!" Boom! 2 fragmentation grenades exploded, sending shards of metal flying at high speed, ripping through the flamethrower troops' bodies and puncturing their fuel tanks. With a loud whoosh, the flames ignited the fuel. The 2 soldiers were instantly engulfed in fire, screaming in agony as they ran about wildly, until they collapsed as charred corpses. The red shields lowered, and Carter and the others stormed into the warehouse. At that moment, the Grey Wolf Warband elites inside finally came to their senses. They roared as they charged forward. "Kill them! Slaughter them all!" The elite Grey Wolf soldiers were heavily armored, wielding massive hooks, power saws, and steel blades. They charged halfway across the warehouse when, the ground shook slightly as a louder roar approached from afar. Something huge was barreling toward them. "Get out of the way, quick!" The Grey Wolf elites seemed to know what was coming, and they scrambled to dodge. But one of them was too slow. A large black shadow barreled straight into him, sending him flying. His head slammed into a metal wall, splitting open like a smashed watermelon. It was a massive mutant, its body covered in boils and embedded with various mechanical implants. Without stopping, the mutant charged directly at Carter with unstoppable momentum. Carter had no time to fully dodge. Relying on instinct, He raised his chainsword to block, and in the next second, the mutant crashed into him. The impact sent them both flying out of the warehouse. The other Imperial guards didn't turn to help, they trusted Captain Carter to deal with the mutant. They silently regrouped and charged at the Grey Wolf elites. Both sides swung their weapons, clashing in brutal, bloody combat. Outside the plaza, Carter was thrown again, skidding across the ground and leaving a trail in his wake. He got to his feet, wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. Such an impact wasn't enough to seriously injure him. Not far away, the mutant shook its head, readying itself for another charge. But Carter had already figured out its attack pattern. Such a brute force, reckless charge wouldn't work on him a third time. Carter stood his ground, calmly observing the mutant's approach. As it lunged at him, Carter dodged at the last moment. The mutant, unable to stop, crashed into the plaza's wall, bringing it down. The creature grew even more enraged, slapping its head in frustration as it howled in madness. "Damn tin can! I'll kill you, I'll tear you apart!" Roaring furiously, it charged again, even faster this time. But Carter was quicker. As the mutant passed by, he grabbed one of its mechanical implants and leapt onto its back. Carter sneered. A true warrior wins with wit and elegance. He activated his chainsword, driving it deep into the mutant's back, the blade tearing through flesh and muscle. Then, Carter threw the sword aside and plunged his hands into the creature's flesh, gripping its spine. With a powerful twist, he snapped the mutant's spine and tore it out. Blood, mixed with oil, sprayed like a fountain. The mutant's roar weakened, and its body went limp, collapsing lifelessly to the ground. Carter, drenched in blood, stood holding the torn spine, looking like a demon from the depths of hell. He grinned with satisfaction. The governor was right, always use your brain. When Carter re-entered the warehouse, the Imperial guards had already wiped out the Grey Wolf elites. Now, only the leader of the Grey Wolf warband remained. It was said that he was the strongest member of the Grey Wolf warband and the one the governor had specifically ordered to be captured. As Carter led the Imperial guards deeper into the warehouse, torches flared up, casting terrifying shadows on the iron walls. There, in front of them, was a massive mountain of flesh, taking up nearly a third of the warehouse. Black flies and parasites crawled and swarmed within the rotting body, while blood flowed down its greasy mass like rivers. Facing these unexpected guests, the Grey Wolf leader finally spoke. His voice was raspy, filled with unimaginable torment. Pain. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audiobook YouTube channel. Chapter 96, Reclaiming the Grey Wolf Warband's Territory. The eerie scene before them heightened everyone's vigilance. This was clearly a powerful foe. But no one was going to back down. According to the governor's orders, this opponent had to be dealt with tonight in order to meet the deadline for the Great Judgment. Prepare for combat. Carter and the Imperial guards drew their chainswords, advancing in a line toward the grotesque, corrupted mass of flesh. Their steps were resolute, fueled by the determination to face death if necessary. However, as they approached, the massive mound of flesh didn't react at all. The voice of the Grey Wolf leader echoed in a tone filled with pain. Torment, suffering, endless plague. Shut up, you bastards. Let me have some peace. He paused, seemingly uncomfortable, his fleshy mass shaking as parasites rained down from his bloated form. It itches so much, someone scratch it for me. Sigh, forget it. Why don't you just kill me already? Carter found it odd. It seemed the leader wasn't even addressing them, but rather talking to himself. He decided to test it out, slashing at a nearby section of the decaying flesh. Pus and blood splattered everywhere. The flesh mound trembled, and the leader groaned. That feels good, keep scratching. This baffled Carter. He felt a bit humiliated by the bizarre situation. He stopped attacking and led the Imperial guards deeper into the lair until they reached the heart of the flesh mound. There, they finally saw the terrifying leader himself. Carter frowned and exchanged glances with his men. Is this him? Seems like it. One of the guards quickly pulled out a wanted poster, scrutinizing the leader's features before nodding in confirmation. The traits match. It's definitely him. The guards stared at the supposedly formidable leader, momentarily at a loss for words. The leader was slumped on a decrepit, iron-spiked throne, his body fused with the decaying, greasy flesh mound. Even the act of moving seemed impossible for him. The only signs of life were his labored breathing and agonized moans. Sensing their presence, the leader weakly lifted his eyes to glance at them. Are you, from the king's court? here to kill me. After speaking, he lowered his gaze again, as if even that small movement had drained all his energy. He had no will to resist. Nothing mattered anymore. He was so tired. Ever since the corruption had claimed him, merging him with this cursed flesh, pain and disease had been his constant companions. Yet, he couldn't bear this blessing. He couldn't enjoy it. Every day, he howled in agony, begging or ordering his subordinates to end his suffering. But no one ever listened. They saw his state as a divine miracle. Now, he just wanted to end the unending pain and plague. Carter felt no sympathy for the wretched leader before him. This heretic scum had killed too many. Resisting the urge to execute him immediately, Carter issued his order. Dig him out. This heretic scum didn't deserve an easy death. He had to face the governor's judgment in public. The Imperial guards used their chainswords to carve through the mound of flesh, pulling the leader from the corrupted mass. As he screamed in pain, they stuffed him into a sealed container. Boom! The guards retrieved high-grade fuel and doused the corrupt flesh mound, setting it ablaze. As Carter and his squad exited the warehouse, the entire structure was engulfed in flames. Swarms of parasites screeched as they burned, along with the rotting flesh, turning to ash. The Imperial guards had prevented a horrific corruption. Had the leader survived his suffering, enduring beyond a certain threshold, it might have drawn far more terrifying attention. In the benevolent gifts of that presence, this planet would have become a playground for plague, with all life forced into an endless nightmare of suffering. As Carter and the Imperial guards emerged from the core area, the battle at the perimeter had already ended. The Grey Wolf warband had been completely wiped out. They had fulfilled the governor's orders. Afterwards, Carter regrouped his men and quickly returned to the king's court. By this time, the fighting throughout the Grey Wolf warband's territory was nearing its conclusion. Only occasional gunfire could be heard. At dawn, large numbers of Imperial Guard and law enforcement troops flooded into the area. They would handle the cleanup and maintain order. The king's court could now officially declare this territory reclaimed. Of course, due to the complexity of the region, it would take considerable effort to fully integrate it into the king's court's governing system. As the sky lightened, Eri, his battle over, walked down the street, cradling the little girl in his arms. He planned to adopt this poor child. The girl sat quietly in Eri's arms, neither crying nor fussing, as she struggled to swallow the wheat flour bar in her mouth. It was a newly manufactured TYPE3 wheat flour bar, with at least 30% wheat content, reserved for high-ranking personnel. On Earth, such a delicacy was unimaginable, and it had completely won over the little girl. Seeing this, Kaze handed her another TYPE3 wheat flour bar. He asked Eri, "What's the little one's name?" "Maya. That's what my mama called me," the girl timidly replied. "That's a nice name." Kaze looked at Eri with concern. "Cyclops, can you really take care of her?" They were all soldiers of the Imperial Guard. Bringing her to the barracks wasn't an option. "Damn it, no, I have no idea how to care for a kid." Eri grumbled loudly. "I'm planning to send her to the Loyalist Academy. She'll get the best education there, far better than staying with a brute like me." Urth's Loyalist Academy was nearly complete. Eri had secured a place for enrollment and had decided to give it to Maya. It was said that the highly respected administrator Bayev would serve as the headmaster, while the honorary headmaster would be none other than the great and benevolent governor himself. All talented children, noble offspring, and war heroes' orphans would be educated there. Besides the resident teachers, experts from various fields would be invited to give lectures, including the bishop, the tech priests, and even the governor. They would be taught the best knowledge and skills, but most importantly, they would learn loyalty. Eri patted Maya's head and advised her, "This is a great opportunity. Damn it, once you're in the Loyalist Academy, you'd better study like your life depends on it, you hear me? I mean that literally, you can't afford to get kicked out." The Loyalist Academy had a high dropout rate. Only the most exceptional could make it through to the end and be entrusted with great responsibilities. Such opportunities were incredibly rare. For people of lower birth, it was a gift beyond generations of struggle. When Eri's family had smuggled themselves from the underhive to the lower hive, half of them had died. By the time they'd fought their way into the upper hive as refugees, Eri was the only one left. He knew just how hard it was for those at the bottom to rise to the top, to reach the higher echelons of society. It was a task akin to ascending to the heavens. To waste such a precious gift would be a desecration. It was something Eri, who had grown up in the underhive, couldn't tolerate. Maya remained silent, but she nodded vigorously. Eri knew the little one understood his words, and it made him happy. Maya was a smart and brave child. As Eri and the others returned to the king's court, the towering spires of the palace loomed overhead. Inside, the maids were busily preparing breakfast for the governor. Meanwhile, our great governor, who had been knocked unconscious by the emperor's powerful psychic backlash, had finally woken up from his stupor. Ah, that felt good. Eden stretched, feeling more refreshed than he had in a long time. He wondered aloud, could the emperor's psychic whip actually have sleep-inducing properties? Chapter 97, The Great Judgment. Reflecting on this, Eden couldn't help but sigh. This wasn't the emperor's psychic backlash, it was his care and protection. Praise the emperor. After indulging in his thoughts, Eden quickly freshened up with the help of the maids and headed to the dining room. Upon reaching the dining room, Eden instructed the maids to call in Carter, Eri, Kays, and the others who had been waiting for some time. He intended to dine with his warriors while receiving their battle reports. The dining room of the Spire Mansion had been renovated to accommodate more people, and its decor had become much more welcoming. After major events and battles, dining with his subjects had become an unspoken rule at the Spire. Eden wanted to stay in close communication with his key subordinates and hear their advice. If he always remained high up in the Spire, isolating himself from his people, it would lead to problems. When the relationship between a leader and their subjects breaks down, or if serious misunderstandings arise, the consequences can be catastrophic. Even the emperor had made this mistake. After the Great Crusade, the emperor handed over military control to the Primarchs and Warmaster Horus. He retreated to Holy Terra, forming the initial Terran Council to manage political matters, while he himself withdrew to a vast laboratory beneath the palace, conducting secret experiments, building a massive psychic machine. This machine was intended to utilize the ancient webway, connecting the warp and the material world. All of this was done in secrecy, with neither the Primarchs nor Horus being informed. Even the Emperor's closest aides were kept in the dark. Whatever the reason for this, the Emperor's actions sowed seeds of doubt. The Primarchs, especially Horus, felt betrayed by the Emperor, their father. Why didn't the Emperor consult them? Why didn't they have seats on the Terran Council? The Emperor had betrayed his generals, granting power to those vile bureaucrats and sycophantic tech priests from Mars. This seed of doubt grew into a towering tree, eventually leading to Horus, betrayal and the rebellion of several other Primarchs. This rebellion plunged the galaxy into war, and the Emperor himself was gravely injured, forced to sit upon the Golden Throne to make amends. In short, communication failures have dire consequences, and the lessons must be learned. The Horus heresy had left scars on the Imperium that persisted even 10,000 years later, never fully healing. The great rift that now spanned the galaxy had torn the Imperium's wounds even deeper. The Imperium's territory was split in two, and countless worlds were plunged into darkness. Chaos surged from the warp. Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh, the four great chaos gods, along with their greater demons, fallen Primarchs, and traitor legions, corrupted world after world. The Imperium was in constant retreat against the onslaught of chaos. Xenos invasions had multiplied exponentially within the Imperium's borders. The Orcs, emboldened by the power of the Great Rift, waged even more destructive, WoG's Tyrannid fleets continued to pour into the galaxy, with genestealer cults spreading like wildfire. More and more human worlds were devoured by the Great Devourer. Meanwhile, the Necron dynasties, awakening from their long slumber, began purging the Xenos that dared to settle on their territories. They sought to reclaim their lost galactic dominance. As for the Tau Empire, with their doctrine of the greater good, they were currently of little concern. In short, the galaxy was descending into chaos. The Imperium was besieged on all sides, teetering on the brink of collapse, and its survival was already a miracle. Now more than ever, the Imperium needed a strong and merciful leader to turn the tide. That leader was none other than Rabute Guilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines, the Emperor's 13th son, and the future Lord Regent. At this point, Guilliman should be awake, right? As a human himself, Eden felt deeply concerned about the future of the Imperium. But, at this moment, there was little he could do. It was time to focus on the present. The world wouldn't fall apart today, and he could only be grateful for that. For now, the upper hive had been reclaimed. The next target was the lower hive. Once the lower hive was reclaimed, he could essentially declare the planet fully under his control. The other 3 hives beyond the primary one were mostly industrial sites with smaller populations, so reclaiming them would be relatively easy. As his influence over the warp grew and the population expanded, his power would increase exponentially. His current goal was to ensure he had enough strength to defend himself when the inevitable crisis struck. With these thoughts swirling, Eden refocused on the task at hand. Soon enough, Carter, Airy, Kays, and the others, freshly cleaned and decontaminated, entered the dining room to meet their governor. It was time to handle the matters at hand. Eden dined with Carter and the others, listening to their battle reports, feeling quite satisfied with the results. When he heard that Airy had adopted a child and planned to send her to the Loyalist Academy, Eden made sure the maids brought the girl, Maya, into the dining room. Airy felt incredibly honored. The governor was far too kind to him. Maya timidly looked at Eden, her eyes constantly darting toward the lavish food on the table, her little head nodding rapidly as if it were a spinning top. But she didn't dare reach for anything without Eden's permission. Noticing this, Eden smiled and handed her a sugar-coated cookie. "Don't be scared, help yourself." Maya quickly stuffed the cookie into her mouth, her eyes glazing over in delight as the sweetness overwhelmed her senses. It was simply too delicious. Watching Maya, Eden understood why Airy had adopted her. The child was indeed cute. After the meal, everyone followed Eden to the Holy Square. By the time they arrived, the execution platform had been set up, and the crowd of onlookers from various social classes had gathered. Drones had been dispatched to patrol and broadcast the trial to all corners of the upper hive, ensuring that all the citizens of the hive would witness this grand trial. This trial was not only a punishment for the heretics and traitors but also a warning. Anyone who betrayed the king's court or the governor would face the harshest of executions. More importantly, the trial served as a way for the citizens to vent their emotions. Eden's psychic senses could feel the overwhelming negative emotions within the people of the upper hive, emotions that had built up after years of suffering. These feelings were a major obstacle to fostering hope and could potentially become fertile ground for chaos. This trial was meant to send a clear message to the people. The ones who oppressed and tormented you, the ones responsible for your miserable lives, were these heretic traitors. The king's court was not to blame. Now, the king's court and the governor had avenged you. Better days were ahead. In short, the trial aimed to punish the heretics and traitors, declare the unification of the upper hive, and promise the people various policies for their benefit. It was all about letting the citizens vent their emotions. This was the core purpose of the Great Judgment. On the execution platform, Yusuf, the leader of the Grey Wolf Warband, and other heretic traitors were bound to special execution devices, awaiting their fate. Soon, the trial began. Bishop Donnie stepped forward to announce the heinous crimes of these individuals, condemning them to execution in the name of the emperor and the king's court. Afterward, Eden personally pulled the mechanical lever before the crowd. The execution began. A combination of electric and fire torture was administered, and it lasted for a full hour. As the heretics and traitors suffered their agonizing punishment, the citizens wept bitterly. They cursed the ones who had caused them so much suffering, finally able to release their pent-up emotions. At the same time, they couldn't help but feel immense gratitude toward the king's court and the governor for saving them. Eventually, the heretics and traitors were reduced to ashes in excruciating pain. Afterward, Eden addressed the crowd, officially announcing the unification of the upper hive and promising a better life for his subjects. As the Great Judgment concluded, Eden could feel that much of the people's oppressive emotions had been relieved. More and more hope was gathering, and soon, Eden had accumulated another 1,000,000 points of hope. With the power of hope bolstering him, Eden's strength surged even further. And now, he was ready to grant another blessing. Chapter 98, The Revival of the Ecclesiarchy. Blessings are part of the authority of the gods, and Eden had carefully studied this ability. The process of bestowing blessings wasn't too complicated. He infused his unique psychic energy into a chosen vessel, where the energy would act upon the vessel, enhancing its natural characteristics. In simple terms, it functioned like a catalyst. It would assist and strengthen the vessel's own abilities, making it much more powerful. At the same time, this energy carried with it certain traits or concepts from Eden himself, which could influence the vessel's physical form and mind. It caused the vessel to instinctively worship Eden as its master, leading to total submission. Take Bishop Donnie, for example. After receiving the blessing, his physical recovery was just a side effect, and most of the changes were in his inherent traits. Bishop Donnie used to be known for his strength, no one took his teaching seriously. But now, he radiated holiness, emanating a unique energy field, with even a faint glow of divine light. This naturally inspired reverence in those around him, making them more willing to listen to his sermons. His preaching abilities were greatly enhanced. Despite his rather radical beliefs, anyone who encountered Bishop Donnie would think of him as the most devout disciple of the God Emperor. In fact, he was now practically a living saint of the ecclesiarchy. Even at the headquarters of the ecclesiarchy on Holy Terra, he would be considered a prominent figure. Of course, he didn't dare go there, fearing that the High Ecclesiarch would purge him. Only Eden dared to accept Bishop Donnie and allow him to continue preaching in the domain. Under the influence of the blessing, Bishop Donnie's reverence for Eden, the chosen savior of the God Emperor, grew stronger, almost reaching blind obedience. The effects of the blessing were undoubtedly powerful, but it wasn't something that could be bestowed on just anyone. Blessings only catalyzed the vessel's existing traits, providing auxiliary enhancement. If the vessel was lacking, the blessing's energy would be wasted. It was similar to upgrading weapons in a game. If the upgrade failed or caused damage, it would be a total loss. Thus, choosing the right vessel for the blessing was crucial. For now, Eden hadn't decided who else should receive a blessing, so he kept it as a last resort, ready for use when needed. Inside the ecclesiarchy cathedral, Bishop Donnie looked around at the somewhat empty space, his old face creased with worry. He was troubled by the state of the ecclesiarchy. Lately, while some people had come to the cathedral for blessings, the number was still far too few. It was nothing compared to its former glory. After the heretic rebellion's assault, most of the ecclesiarchy members in the upper hive had been wiped out, and many local churches were destroyed. The ecclesiarchy on Urth was on the brink of collapse, and the king's court wasn't much better off. In such a dire situation, preaching had been set aside. Now that the upper hive had been reclaimed, it was the perfect time to revive the ecclesiarchy. Rebuilding local churches and erecting statues would require a significant amount of manpower and resources. At present, the ecclesiarchy couldn't bear such large-scale projects. Should he seek help from the governor? But they had already spent so many resources just repairing the statues of the God Emperor in the king's court. Would the governor even agree to another request? Bishop Donnie frowned, torn by indecision. Just then, a seraph at the cathedral entrance delivered a message. The governor was here. Bishop Donnie's old face lit up with joy, and he grabbed his staff, rushing toward the cathedral door. The governor never came without a reason. His arrival could only mean good news. Like a gust of wind, Bishop Donnie raced to the door, but then stopped abruptly, regaining his holy composure. Standing tall, he waited for the slowly approaching Eden. By the grace of the God Emperor, please, follow me. Eden looked at the sanctified Bishop Donnie and couldn't help but marvel at the power of the blessing. It was truly incredible. If he went to the headquarters of the ecclesiarchy, wouldn't he easily rise to the rank of High Ecclesiarch? Eden couldn't help but miss the old Bishop Donnie, who used to be so enthusiastic. Now he was far more aloof. Could the blessing have even altered his personality? As usual, Eden followed Bishop Donnie to the shrine for prayer, blessings, and the ritual. Several seraphs sang hymns in the air, showering Eden with petals and holy water until he was practically buried in them. Ah, that familiar feeling. Looking at Bishop Donnie, who resembled a living saint, Eden vaguely felt that the old man hadn't truly changed. As the blessings neared completion, Eden suddenly sensed a faint power emerging from the shrine and entering his body. Although this power had little effect on Eden, it would greatly benefit ordinary people. Goodness, could the old man actually bestow blessings now? This ability could greatly amplify his sermons. With the ceremony over, Eden got straight to the point. I'm here to discuss the revival of the ecclesiarchy on Urth, Bishop. Praise the God Emperor, Bishop Donnie exclaimed. Your actions are a great service to the ecclesiarchy. The God Emperor will bless you. It's only natural. As the chosen savior of the God Emperor, I have a responsibility to revive the ecclesiarchy. Reviving the ecclesiarchy was one of Eden's major plans. The imperial government could not function without the God Emperor. Moreover, the faith in the God Emperor spread by the ecclesiarchy would greatly calm the hearts of the people and maintain order within the domain. For 10,000 years, the faith in the God Emperor had spread throughout the galaxy. Such a vast and deeply rooted force must be fully utilized. Unbeknownst to Bishop Donnie, the faith energy created by his tireless preaching was almost entirely siphoned off by Eden's small son, becoming nourishment for himself. To Eden, what belonged to the God Emperor was his own. As long as the God Emperor didn't punish him, he would keep absorbing the faith energy. Under these circumstances, the revival of the ecclesiarchy had to happen quickly. Eden informed Bishop Donny that the king's court would send personnel to assist with the reconstruction of local churches and the erection of more statues of the God Emperor. They would also help the ecclesiarchy recruit new members. The Ministry of Internal Affairs would implement new policies, giving workers 2 days off per month as prayer days, during which they could visit the church to pray. Was 2 days off a month too little? That's a joke. Right now, the upper hive was in shambles, with millions of citizens in dire need of resources. Even Eden, the governor, worked late into the night, his back aching from exhaustion. 2 days was already generous. Any more than that, and even the hardest working laborers wouldn't dare take so much time off. Eden could only ensure the workers had enough food and reasonable working hours. Even if the work was tough, they wouldn't starve or work to death. Having food to eat, rest days, and the opportunity to seek the God Emperor's blessings at church, that was already a paradise-like life for the workers. After the discussion, Bishop Donny was deeply grateful, personally escorting Eden to the cathedral door. As he watched Eden's departing figure, tears welled up in his eyes, lingering in admiration. As expected, he truly is the most devout servant of the God Emperor. Chapter 99, Establishing the Tribunal. 3 months later. Under the leadership of the king's court, the reconstruction of the upper hive was in full swing. Now, the local branches of the ecclesiarchy in the upper hive had been rebuilt, and more newly ordained priests were starting to preach. With the comforting efforts of the priests and the law enforcement officers maintaining order, the upper hive's stability was largely restored. All the industrial zones were functioning smoothly, ramping up the production of various weapons and supplies. Phase 3 of the Green Wave farm had also been completed, with the expected crop yield able to sustain the entire upper hive. Plans for reclaiming the lower hive had been put on the agenda, and the defense force had undergone another round of large-scale recruitment. With full mobilization, the defense force was expected to expand to 500,000 soldiers, and they would complete their training within 6 months. By that time, the defense force's arsenal of armored tanks, self-propelled artillery, energy cannons, and standard-issue lasguns would be ready as well. Once the weapons were secured, the defense force could officially begin operations. The countdown to the reclaiming of the lower hive had started, 6 months to go. In addition to religion, industry, and the military, Eden had also been paying close attention to internal affairs. He had established a new department for civil affairs under the Ministry of Internal Affairs, led by Popov from the Secretariat, to implement various policies benefiting the public. This move was warmly welcomed by the citizens, who increasingly supported and adored their benevolent governor. I don't want to work. Eden had just returned from the opening ceremony of the Loyalist Academy. Back in his governor's office at the Spire residence, he collapsed onto his specially made sofa, feeling like a salted fish. The non-stop work in recent days had exhausted him. But he hadn't been lying down for long before Linda, the head maid, walked in with the maids. Linda took the warm towel from one of the maids and gently wiped Eden's face, easing his fatigue. Seeing how attentively the head maid took care of him, Eden felt a warmth in his heart. "You're really too good." Hearing the governor praise her, Linda blushed slightly, her heart racing. She hesitated for a moment before reminding him, "Governor, you need to get up." As she spoke, Linda tidied Eden's appearance, adjusting his clothing close to him. "Lord Deville from the Secretariat is waiting to see you." "Eden, are you a devil?" Reluctantly, Eden gritted his teeth and stood up, regaining the dignity of a governor. After all, he had arranged all this work himself. In Warhammer 40k universe, slacking off wasn't an option. As governor, Eden was the only hope for the people of Urth. Billions of citizens were counting on him for salvation. This wasn't just for the people, it was for himself too. If one day the Chaos Demons invaded or the Orcs or Tyranids attacked, what could he do without strength? Wait for death? No, he had to fight, and fight hard. In the future, when his territory expanded and the situation stabilized, Eden planned to write a book called The Struggles of Eden Grant. He wanted everyone to know how he, Eden Grant, worked hard to create a new empire. Eden sat down in the governor's seat and pulled out a stack of documents from memory, starting to read through them. These were the family archives of Deville, a member of the Secretariat. The archives had been specially retrieved from the vast records by servitors at Eden's request, a task that had taken considerable time. Most of the families loyal to the governor had detailed archives stored in the record vault, a symbol of honor. Deville's family, the Rapp family, had been slaves in the Black Mines 1,000 years ago, only gaining their freedom after being liberated by Eden's ancestors. In the centuries that followed, the Rapp family worked tirelessly to rise through the ranks. Starting as overseers in the lower hive's factories, they gradually worked their way into the upper hive over several generations, eventually becoming officials in the logistics department of the king's court. It was at this point that their position stabilized. Being a family of ordinary bloodline, formerly slaves, they had no further path for advancement. But even so, theirs was a position many could only dream of. King's court officials held their posts as hereditary titles. As long as they remained loyal and didn't make any grave mistakes, the descendants of the Rapp family could live in the upper hive, looking down upon the masses in the lower hive. Of course, this came at a price. According to the archives, since becoming hereditary officials in the logistics department, 8 members of the Rapp family had died or been killed in service over the last 500 years. The Rapp family's descendants had done everything to hold on to this position. Having studied their family history so thoroughly, none of them ever wanted to return to the darkness of the lower hive. That was a fate worse than death. Eden fell silent as he read through the Rapp family's archives. It had been no easy feat for them. From the documents, Eden saw the Rapp family's defining traits: absolute loyalty and unrelenting effort. It was through these qualities that the Rapp family had risen from overseers to their current status. Deville had inherited these fine traditions, loyal and hardworking. According to the records, Deville had faced several attacks while working in the logistics department, always charging to the front lines. In the most recent record, he had saved an official named Popov during a heretic attack, suffering serious injuries in the process. After reading Deville's file, Eden nodded in satisfaction. Loyal, fearless, intelligent, and with great learning and adaptability. Such qualities were rare among King's court officials. He was exactly the type of person Eden was looking for. Go, Governor, sir. Deville entered the governor's office, led by a maid, maintaining impeccable manners, though he appeared slightly nervous. Take a seat, Eden said casually as he moved to sit on the sofa, motioning for Deville to sit across from him. Deville hesitated for a moment but quickly sat down. His body sank into the soft sofa, something he wasn't used to. Most chairs in the king's court were stiff and hard. As Deville watched the governor across from him, still browsing through documents, he felt a mixture of fear and honor. He had entered the governor's office. Something the Rapp family hadn't achieved in generations. Though his family lived in the upper hive, they were still far from the lofty spires of the governor's residence. And now, he had made it. At the same time, Deville couldn't help but feel a tinge of expectation. In recent days, many of his colleagues from the secretariat had been assigned to various important positions. That coward Popov, after leaving the governor's office, had been appointed head of the newly established Civil Affairs Department. Yet Deville's future remained uncertain. He had felt quite disheartened, even ashamed, believing he hadn't lived up to the governor's expectations. But now, the governor had summoned him, proving he still had greater value. Eden finally stopped going through the files. Damn these paper documents, he had accidentally mixed them up and had spent all this time reorganizing them. He handed the documents to Deville. These are the archives for the new secret organization of the King's Court, the Tribunal. You will become the High Inquisitor of this new organization, responsible for leading and establishing it. Chapter 100. Time to showcase the technology of the 3K era. For Eden, establishing his own tribunal was of utmost importance. The newly formed tribunal would answer solely to him, becoming the most powerful secret organization in the King's Court. The inquisitors of the tribunal would have immense authority within the domain, able to investigate anyone outside of Eden, while also taking on the responsibility of rooting out and eliminating hidden threats. This was a vital force to balance his administrative system and officials, as well as to deal with covert external dangers. In the future, as his territory expanded, the tribunal's power would grow as well. After reading through the documents, Deville trembled slightly, fully understanding what his new role entailed. Even more so, he realized the immense responsibility and authority that Eden had entrusted to him. Such trust, the only way he could repay it was with absolute loyalty. Seeing that Deville understood his task, Eden went over some additional details with him. Building the tribunal was no easy feat. Not only would it require a group of loyal and capable people, but it would also need strong military backing. Thus, Eden would assign 20 of his personal guards to join the tribunal as its initial members. He would also send a batch of elite soldiers from the defense force, law enforcement officers, and administrative staff to serve as deputies, interpreters, interrogators, and apprentices. With this, the tribunal's foundation would be set. How it developed in the future would depend on how well Deville and his team managed it. After the discussion, Eden looked at Deville seriously. High Inquisitor, the tribunal of the King's Court is now yours to command. Deville sprang to his feet, his gaze firm as he performed a perfect Aquila salute. All for the governor. Satisfied, Eden nodded and let Deville get to work. He was confident that this loyal and capable subordinate would carry out the responsibilities he had been entrusted with. Having completed yet another important task, Eden felt particularly pleased. He now had his personal guards, the tribunal, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the Mechanicum, the Ecclesiarchy, and the Defense Force all under his control. As for larger organizations like Space Marine chapters or the Imperial Navy Fleet, those were still beyond his reach for the time being. Only after controlling the entirety of Earth, and even more planets, could he gather enough hope energy to delve into the warp for resources to further his ambitions. There were countless treasures lost in the warp over tens of thousands of years. Things like lost starships, rare forging materials, various weapons, ancient relics, and even the remains and armor of space marines. It was like a treasure trove, just waiting for him to claim it. Thinking about it, Eden almost drooled. Imagine unearthing a fully intact super battleship with STC technology from the golden age of humanity. The mere thought of it made him salivate. Wouldn't that send him straight to the stars? He snapped out of his daydreams quickly, though. First things first, he needed to focus on the tasks at hand. Currently, the King's Court was already taking shape, resembling a miniature empire. In the future, Eden planned to replicate even more imperial institutions. Eden had already decided that the governing system within his expanding territory would follow the basic framework of the Imperium. It wasn't that he didn't want to change things, he simply didn't dare to. If the Imperium were like a bug-ridden program, then its basic system was the pile of bad code holding it all together. As faulty as that code was, it had kept the Imperium running for over tens of thousands of years, which was an incredible feat. No way he could risk changing it. If he messed with it and caused the whole thing to crash, wouldn't that lead to an immediate disaster? So Eden would only make minor adjustments, adding patches here and there to make the system run smoother. Those were his plans for the future. Worried that he might forget them, Eden quickly recorded his thoughts on the typewriter. At a typing speed of 1,000 words per minute, he soon had all his ideas documented. He tore the page from the machine and carefully stored it away. It would be a nightmare if it got mixed in with other documents. Eden stood in front of a nearly 5-meter-high filing cabinet, staring at the endless rows of slots in confusion. Which slot did I put the future development plan in again? Fortunately, his enhanced brain kicked in, and after a moment of thought, he remembered, 6th row, 14th column, slot number 117. Good thing he remembered. If he hadn't, he'd have had to consult the dictionary-sized index to find it. After filing away the paper, Eden returned to his desk and popped a frosted Polaro cookie into his mouth. A quick snack to replenish his energy before getting back to work. Looking at the small pile of documents left on his desk, he felt a surge of motivation. Once these were dealt with, he would be done for the day. The great governor could finally rest. Eden buried himself in the work, grinding through the complex texts that made his head spin. But no problem, persistence was key to victory. Soon enough, Eden finished all the paperwork and collapsed into his chair with a satisfied smile. Finally, it was over. Just as he was about to relax, 2 maids entered. Eden's pupils instantly widened as he lost all his will to live. No. Each maid was carrying a stack of files nearly a meter high, and they looked startled. "Governor, sir, these are more documents that need your attention." Eden, of course, wouldn't vent his frustration on the maids. Weakly, he said, "Fine, put them here." "Yes, sir." The 2 maids quickly set down the files and practically fled the office, overwhelmed by the governor's palpable frustration. Eden stared at the newly arrived stacks of files, feeling a headache coming on. With a crash, the piles of documents collapsed, spilling across his lap. Eden froze, filled with regret. He never should have agreed to take on part of Bayev's administrative duties. Originally, he had taken it on with the mindset of learning. As a ruler, he needed to educate himself. At first, it had been manageable. After all, with the king's court's previous laissez-faire management, paper documents had been plentiful but still within reach. But as Eden implemented more new policies and regulations, the shift to a more refined administrative approach caused the amount of paperwork to skyrocket. The endless flow of redundant, outdated, and disorganized documents had left him buried in his office. He couldn't even imagine the kind of pressure the high-ranking imperial administrators must face. No wonder so many high lords either died from overwork or went mad. Suddenly, a warp rift appeared in the governor's office. From it emerged Rabute Gilliman, clad in his armor of destiny, glowing with power and radiating overwhelming authority. His eyes, piercing and intense, locked onto Eden. Eden, the Imperium needs you. Come with me to Holy Terra, and you will become a High Lord. With that, Gilliman's massive hand reached out toward him. Stay away from me, Eden screamed, jolting awake, staring at his cluttered desk, and letting out a sigh of relief. It had only been a nightmare. Thankfully, it wasn't real, or he would rather have died on the spot. Looking at the chaos of paperwork, Eden's patience finally reached its limit. This workload was unbearable. He needed to reform, introduce the internet and AI, and move to online administration to optimize workflow and efficiency. Fortunately, these changes were already in motion. Eden had given many ideas about the internet to the intelligent servitor and current Magos, Moss, asking him to quietly run experiments. There was no other way. The Adeptus Mechanicus heavily restricted access to network technology, even preventing any attempts at neural interfacing. So, for now, Eden would have to settle for using human 3K-era tech. It was time to show everyone the wonders of 3K-era technology. Thank you for watching. Continue exploring the fascinating world of Chinese novels with us. Hit that subscribe button on Chinese Novel Audiobook to stay updated with our latest stories. And never miss out on a great listen.